Tonight, we're diving into the complete history of Arceus and the divine forces that shape the Pokémon world. This is a fascinating topic, but I'll keep my narration calm to ensure you can still drift off to sleep. Thank you to those of you who've been joining us consistently. If you're falling asleep with us tonight, let me know in the comments how many nights in a row you've been here. And if this is your first night, just comment night 1. Now back to the video. Before there was a world to walk upon, before there was a sky to gaze into, and before the concepts of yesterday or tomorrow even existed, there was only a void, a swirling infinite vortex of absolute chaos and nothingness. In the heart of this silence, a single egg manifested. From that egg hatched the original one, the being we call Arceus. It is the first heartbeat in a silent universe, the architect of every law of physics we take for granted, and the silent watcher over a reality it pulled from the dark. But to understand Arceus is to look into a mirror that reflects the very limits of human and Pokémon understanding. We call it the Alpha Pokémon, yet its true nature is so vast that ancient civilizations could only describe its power through metaphors of 1,000 arms shaping the land. It is a creature of gold and white, but the lore suggests it is a panentheistic entity, a soul that literally contains the dimensions of time and space within itself. It does not just live in the world lives inside the mind of Arceus. The stakes of this history are nothing less than the foundation of existence. Every time you throw a Pokeball, every time you witness a sunset in the Sinnoh region, and every time a clock ticks, you are experiencing the direct will of this primordial deity. But the story of Arceus isn't just a peaceful tale of creation. It is a history marked by celestial banishments, the shattering of the universe into mirrored dimensions, and a recurring struggle between divine order and mortal ambition. Why did the original one choose to delegate its power to the creation trio, knowing the potential for Giratina's violence? How did the ancient Celestica people possess a clarity of truth that was lost to the Diamond and Pearl clans, who spent generations worshipping shadows of the true God? And perhaps most mysteriously, why would a being of such infinite magnitude allow itself to be challenged by a mortal hero or captured within the confines of a human-made device? As we peel back the layers of Hisuian myth and Sinnoh folklore, we find a deity that is both a protector and a judge. From the space-time rifts that nearly tore reality apart to the quiet halls of the Origin realm, where the light never fades, we are looking at a history that spans billions of years and yet exists in a single, eternal moment. We are about to go beyond the Pokédex entries and the surface-level legends to uncover how the gods truly shaped the world, and what it means for the future of every living thing in the Pokémon universe. Before anything existed, before there was a single star, a single atom, or even a single thought, there was nothing. But that nothing was not empty. It was a state of absolute chaos, a primordial soup of potential without form, without light, without time. This was the void before time itself, a darkness so complete it defies comprehension. In this void, there was no up or down, no beginning or end, no space to contain a universe. It was a perfect, infinite stillness that held within it the seeds of all that would ever be. And then, something shifted. From the heart of that absolute chaos, a vortex began to manifest. It was not a wind or a storm as we would understand it, but a churning of raw, unformed possibility. This vortex spun without a center, a whirlpool of nothingness that somehow had direction. It was the first disturbance in the eternal quiet, the first movement in a realm where movement had no meaning. This vortex did not emerge from anything. It simply was a spontaneous eruption of order from disorder, a crack in the fabric of non-existence. From within this vortex, a single form began to coalesce. It was an egg, but not an egg of flesh or shell. This was the single egg, a vessel of pure potential, a container for the first spark of consciousness. It shimmered with a light that had no source, a glow that pierced the ancient darkness. The egg was not born, it was manifested, pulled from the chaos by forces that did not yet have names. It floated in the void, a perfect solitary object in a sea of nothing, and within it, something was stirring. That something was a consciousness, a mind that predated physical reality itself. This was the original one, the first being to ever exist. It had no body, no form, no name. It simply was. It was an awareness that existed before time could measure it. a presence that filled the egg with a quiet, deliberate intelligence. This consciousness did not think in words or images. It thought in pure concepts, in the fundamental laws that would one day govern all existence. It was the architect of reality before there was any reality to build. This original one, which ancient peoples would later call Arceus, was not a god in the sense of a being that rules over creation. It was creation itself, given awareness. It contained within its soul the blueprint for every star, every world, every creature, and every moment that would ever exist. It was the unified field of all time and space, compressed into a single point of awareness. In the darkness of the void, it waited, patient and eternal, for the moment when it would unfold its vision into the universe. The egg that held this consciousness was not a prison. It was a womb. It was a sanctuary where the original one could gather its strength, contemplate its purpose, and prepare for the monumental task ahead. The chaos outside the egg was still churning, still raw and untamed, but within the egg, there was perfect order. The vortex that had birthed the egg continued to spin, a guardian of the threshold between what was and what could be. And in that sacred space, the original one began to dream of creation. It dreamed of light, of the first dawn that would shatter the eternal night. It dreamed of space, of vast expanses where galaxies could swirl and planets could spin. It dreamed of time, of a river of moments that would flow from a beginning to an end. And it dreamed of life, of beings that would look up at the stars and wonder about their own origins. These were not idle fantasies. They were the first drafts of reality, the initial sketches of a universe that would one day be. But before any of that could happen, the original one had to emerge from the egg. It had to break the seal of its own isolation and step into the chaos it would transform. The moment of its birth would be the first true event in the history of existence, the point at which nothing became something. And when that moment came, the void would never be the same. The vortex would calm, the chaos would recede, and the first light would shine. This is the story of how the universe began, not with a bang, with a thought so vast, so profound, that it could hold the entirety of creation within itself. The original one was not just the first Pokémon, it was the first everything. It was the alpha, the beginning, the source from which all things would flow. And as it prepared to leave the egg, it knew that its work had only just begun. The void was waiting, and it was time to fill it with meaning. The journey from that single egg to the world we know is a story of divine architecture, of cosmic balance, and of the creation of gods who would govern the very fabric of reality. But before we can understand the 1,000 arms that shaped the universe, we must first understand the mind that willed them into being. That mind, that original one, is about to take its first step into the light, and what follows will be the greatest act of creation ever conceived. We left off with the egg, that single, impossible object, drifting in a void so absolute that even the concept of darkness had no meaning. It was the only thing that existed, a solitary point of potential in a universe that had not yet been born. And from that egg, something stirred. Not a body, not yet a form, but a consciousness, a singular spirit that contained within it the blueprint for all of reality. This was Arceus, the original one. But the question that has haunted scholars and mythologists for generations is this: how did a single being, no matter how powerful, go from existing alone in the void to shaping an entire cosmos? The answer, according to the oldest texts, lies in a number that is both literal and deeply metaphorical: 1,000. The ancient Celestica civilization, the first humans to truly comprehend the nature of Arceus, left behind fragmented records that speak of the 1,000 arms. Now, if you picture 1,000 physical limbs sprouting from a golden creature, you are missing the point entirely. The arms were not arms in the way we understand them. They were conduits. They were extensions of will. Each arm represented a single, discrete act of creation, a thread of divine intention woven into the fabric of nothingness. When Arceus began to shape the universe, it did not wave a hand and make the stars appear. It reached out with 1,000 simultaneous thoughts, each one a tool, a sculptor's chisel, a weaver's needle. It was an architectural process of staggering complexity. Think of it this way: before there could be a world, there had to be a foundation. The void was not empty in the way we think of an empty room. It was a state of pure chaos, a roiling sea of potential that had no structure, no rules, no dimensions. To create anything within that chaos was an act of immense violence against the natural order of nothingness. Arceus used its 1,000 arms to first establish the fundamental laws of physics. One arm defined the direction of time, ensuring that cause would always precede effect. Another arm carved out the dimensions of space, giving distance and volume to what had been infinite. A third arm wove the fabric of matter, pulling particles from the raw energy of the void. It was not a single moment of magic. It was a long, painstaking construction project, carried out by a being that existed beyond the very concepts it was creating. And this is where the metaphor deepens. The 1,000 arms were not just about brute force or even about raw power. They were about unification. The Celestica texts describe the original spirit as a consciousness that unified all time, all space, and all forms of human and Pokémon consciousness before physical reality ever existed. That is a profound statement. It means that the separation we feel between ourselves and the world, between human thought and Pokémon instinct, between the past and the present, is an illusion. In the beginning, before the arms began their work, everything was one. The spirit of a human and the spirit of a Magikarp were the same spark, the same flicker of awareness within the original one. Arceus did not create consciousness separately. It simply divided its own infinite awareness into fragments, each one a soul waiting to be born into a physical form. The 1,000 arms were the tools that made that division possible. Now let us move from the cosmic to the specific. Once the universe was established, Arceus turned its attention to a particular corner of reality, a place that would become the stage for some of the most significant events in Pokémon history. This was the region we now know as Sinnoh, but which was once called Hisui. The architectural process of shaping this land was not a matter of raising mountains and digging rivers. Though that certainly happened, it was about embedding the divine hierarchy into the very geography of the world. Arceus looked upon the raw landmass and saw it as a canvas. Using its 1,000 arms, it began to shape the continent with a purpose. Every peak, every valley, every lake was placed with intention. The central mountain, Mount Coronet, was not just a mountain. It was a pillar, a physical anchor that connected the world of mortals to the dimension from which Arceus watched. It was the axis upon which the entire region turned. But the work did not stop at Sinnoh. There is another region, one that is often overlooked in the grand narrative of creation, but which holds a crucial piece of the puzzle. That region is Rancy. If Sinnoh was the heart of creation, the place where the fundamental laws were grounded, then Rancy was the experiment. It was a land designed to test the relationship between conflict and harmony. The ancient texts suggest that Arceus shaped Rancy as crucible, a place where the concepts of human and Pokémon consciousness could be tested against each other. The 1,000 arms did not just build the land, they wove the very fabric of destiny within it. They created a place where kingdoms would rise and fall, where warriors would bond with Pokémon in ways that would define the soul of the world. Rancy was not an afterthought. It was a necessary component of the divine architecture, a proving ground for the spirits that would inhabit the universe. And through all of this, the singular spirit of Arceus remained the constant. It was the unifying force that held the 1,000 arms together. Without that central consciousness, the arms would have been nothing more than chaotic energy, each one pulling in a different direction, creating a universe of contradictions and paradoxes. But Arceus was the master. It was the conductor of an orchestra that spanned infinity. Every thought, every intention, every act of creation was filtered through that one calm, eternal mind. It is a humbling thought. The same spirit that shaped the stars and the mountains is the same spirit that in some small way flickers within every living being. We are all echoes of that original unity. So the 1,000 arms built the universe. They carved out the dimensions. They shaped the lands of Sinnoh and Rancy. They divided the singular consciousness into the countless souls that would populate reality. But the work was far from over. A universe of laws and landscapes is just a shell. It needs rulers. It needs forces to govern the flow of time, the boundaries of space, and the balance of matter and antimatter. The original one had created the stage, but it could not be the only actor. It needed sovereigns to manage the day-to-day operations of existence. And so, after the arms had finished their grand architecture, Arceus turned its attention to the next phase of creation. It was time to give birth to the first sovereigns, the beings who would inherit the responsibility of maintaining the universe. And that, as you might imagine, is where the story takes a turn into the truly extraordinary. That is the subject of our next chapter, Birth of the First Sovereigns. With the 1,000 arms of the original one having shaped the landmasses of Sinnoh and Rancy, the universe was still incomplete. It was a structure without a foundation, a story without a beginning or an end. Arceus had crafted the stage, but the stage itself had no stagehands, no forces to govern the very fabric of reality. And so, from the light that poured from the alpha Pokémon's soul, the first sovereigns were born. The first to emerge was a being of pure temporal energy, a dragon whose body seemed to pulse with the rhythm of every clock that would ever tick. This was Dialga, the entity entrusted with the flow of time itself. Before Dialga, time was a chaotic ocean, moments crashing into each other without order, past and future indistinguishable. Arceus gave Dialga the power to weave that chaos into a river, to set a direction, to create cause and effect. With Dialga's first breath, the universe gained a heartbeat. The temporal flow stabilized, and for the first time, events could unfold in sequence. Every second that would ever pass owed its existence to this sovereign of time. But a river needs a channel, and a heartbeat needs a body, so the second sovereign was born. Palkia emerged as the master of space, a being whose very presence warped the dimensions around it. Where Dialga gave the universe a timeline, Palkia gave it a stage. Before Palkia, space was a formless void. No up, no down, no distance, no near. Palkia's arrival expanded the physical dimensions outward, creating the vastness that would hold galaxies, stars, and worlds. It was Palkia who carved the emptiness into a canvas, who defined the boundaries of existence. With every stretch of its arms, the universe grew larger, more real, more tangible. In those first moments, there was perfect harmony between the original spirit and its first children. Dialga and Palkia moved in synchrony, their powers interwoven like threads in a tapestry. Time and space are not separate. They are two sides of the same coin. Dialga's flow gave meaning to Palkia's expanse, and Palkia's expanse gave room for Dialga's flow. Together, they formed the fundamental framework upon which all reality would be built. Arceus watched them, not as a master overseeing servants, but as a parent observing the first steps of its offspring. There was no conflict, no jealousy, only the quiet satisfaction of a universe beginning to breathe. Yet even in this pristine beginning, a shadow lingered. The creation of time and space required a balance, a counterweight to prevent the fabric of reality from tearing under its own weight. That counterweight would be the third sovereign, a being of antimatter and distortion. But that is a story for another chapter. For now, the first two children of Arceus stood in the light. The universe was stable, the stage was set, the clock was wound, and the great cosmic drama could finally begin. But as with all things born from light, darkness was already stirring in the depths of that new reality. The shadow of antimatter was about to fall, and it would change everything. With time and space now woven into the fabric of existence, the universe began to breathe. Dialga ensured that every moment flowed from one to the next, a river of causality that could never be reversed. Palkia stretched the boundaries of reality, giving form to the infinite expanse, allowing worlds to exist side by side, separated by distance and dimension. For a brief, perfect instant, the cosmos was balanced. But balance, as the original one understood, is not a static state. It is a tension, a dynamic equilibrium that requires constant vigilance. And within that tension, a third force was about to emerge, one that would challenge the very nature of order itself. From the same primordial essence that gave rise to Dialga and Palkia, Arceus brought forth a third being. This was Giratina, the dragon of antimatter, where Dialga governed the forward march of time, and Palkia commanded the vastness of space. Giratina was given dominion over something far more abstract, far more dangerous. It was the embodiment of the void between moments, the space between spaces, the shadow that exists in the absence of light. In the language of the ancient Celestica, this realm was called the Reverse, a dimension that mirrored the material world, but was fundamentally opposite in nature. It was not a place of evil but of negation, a place where the rules of time and space did not apply, where cause and effect could be inverted, where existence itself could be undone. Giratina was born with a temperament that reflected its domain. It was not malicious in the way we might understand malice, but it was inherently violent, driven by a primal instinct to unmake, to tear apart, to return all things to the chaos from which they came. Its power was not destructive in the sense of fire or explosion. It was corrosive, eroding the very structures of reality. Where Dialga and Palkia built, Giratina unraveled. Where they created order, it introduced entropy. And for a time, the three dragons coexisted in a fragile dance, each pushing against the others, maintaining a cosmic equilibrium. But that equilibrium could not hold. The first divine conflict was not a war of armies or a clash of titans. It was a fundamental incompatibility. Giratina's nature was to oppose, to resist, to tear down the very fabric that its siblings were weaving. It did not attack them directly, but its presence alone caused rifts in the temporal stream and fractures in spatial continuity. Dialga would find its timeline disrupted, moments skipping or repeating without cause. Palkia would feel its dimensions warp, edges fraying as if the universe itself was developing holes. The creation trio was supposed to work in harmony, but Giratina's violent essence made harmony impossible. It was like trying to build a house, while one of the workers was constantly pulling out the nails. Arceus watched from its realm beyond time and space, a golden silhouette observing the growing instability. The original one had not created Giratina to be a destroyer, but to be a necessary counterbalance, a force that would keep the other two from becoming too rigid, too absolute. Yet the dragon's nature proved too extreme. It could not be tempered. It could not be reasoned with. Every attempt to integrate it into the cosmic order only led to further disruption. The universe was still young, still fragile, and Giratina's presence threatened to collapse it before it could fully solidify. So Arceus made a decision that would echo through all of creation. It would not destroy Giratina. Destruction was not in its nature, and to unmake the third dragon would be to deny the very principle of antimatter that was essential to existence. Instead, it would isolate it. It would create a prison, a realm where Giratina could exist without threatening the rest of reality. That prison would be the reverse, the distortion world, a dimension that mirrored the material universe, but was fundamentally separate. A place where time and space had no meaning, where the laws of physics were suggestions at best. And so, with a gesture that rippled across dimensions, Arceus banished Giratina. The third dragon was cast into the Shadow Realm, a place of twisted geometries and impossible angles, where up could be down and forward could be backward. It was not a punishment in the human sense, but a necessity. The universe needed its opposite, but it needed that opposite contained. Giratina would rule over the distortion world, a sovereign in its own domain, but forever separated from the world of light and order. But the story does not end there. The reverse is not merely a prison. It is a mirror, a reflection of everything that exists, and it has a will of its own. And within that twisted realm, Giratina would wait, plotting, watching, always seeking a way to return. The first divine conflict had ended, but the shadow of antimatter would never truly be extinguished. It would only grow darker, more patient, more determined. And in the ages to come, it would find allies among mortals who sought power beyond their understanding. But that is a tale for another time. A tale that begins with the construction of the Distortion World Prison, a place where even the gods must tread carefully. Arceus had created 3 sovereigns to govern the fabric of reality. Dialga to command the river of time, Palkia to shape the endless expanse of space. And then there was Giratina, the third sibling, born to rule over antimatter and the reverse, a concept so alien, so fundamentally opposed to the order of the universe, that its very presence threatened to unravel the harmony the original one had so carefully woven. We saw how Giratina's violent nature, its raw and uncontrollable power, forced Arceus to act. But what happened next was not destruction, it was exile, and the place of that banishment would become one of the most enigmatic prisons in all of existence. The dimension Arceus chose for Giratina was not a cell carved from rock or a cage built of iron. It was a realm that lay beyond the very framework of reality itself. A pocket of existence where time did not flow, where space did not stretch, and where the laws of physics were merely suggestions. This is the distortion world, a plane that exists in the gaps between dimensions, a place that cannot be mapped by any coordinate system known to mortal minds. Imagine, if you will, a landscape that defies all logic. Gravity pulls in multiple directions at once. Platforms float in impossible arrangements, and the horizon curves inward upon itself. There is no sky, no ground in any stable sense, only an endless twilight of shifting geometries and silent glowing crystals that pulse with an eerie light. This is where Giratina would spend its eternity, not simply locked away, but transformed into the guardian of the very balance it once threatened. Arceus understood something profound. Exile was not merely a punishment, it was a necessity. By consigning Giratina to the distortion world, the original one created a failsafe for the entire cosmos. If Dialga and Palkia ever became enraged, if their control over time and space spiraled into chaos, Giratina would serve as the ultimate counterweight. The distortion world exists as a mirror to our own reality, a negative space where the rules are inverted. When time breaks, when space tears, when the fabric of the universe begins to fray, it is Giratina's role to pull those fractures back into alignment, to absorb the imbalance and restore equilibrium from the outside. In this sense, Giratina became the silent warden of cosmic order, watching from beyond the walls of creation, ready to intervene when the other two sovereigns faltered. But exile carries a heavy price. Being cast out of the vibrant, structured universe, condemned to an endless realm of twisted geometry and eternal solitude, breeds resentment, and that resentment would not remain dormant. Deep within the distortion world, Giratina brooded. It remembered the warmth of creation, the company of its siblings, the purpose it was born to fulfill, and it remembered being judged as too violent, too dangerous, too different. The distortion world may have been a prison, but it was also a place of immense power, a realm where Giratina could grow stronger, where its antimatter nature could expand unchecked. Over eons, that smouldering anger would crystallize into a plan. It would not attack Arceus directly, for even Giratina knew the limits of its strength. Instead, it would wait, and it would manipulate, and it would find mortals willing to do its bidding. This lingering bitterness is the seed from which future catastrophes would sprout. The distortion world prison kept Giratina contained, but it could not contain its will, and in the grand tapestry of history, that will would eventually reach out, tear open rifts in the sky above Mount Coronet, and set in motion events that would threaten not just Hisui, but the very balance of time and space itself. But before we reach that breaking point, we must turn our gaze upward, beyond the distortion world, beyond even the realm of the creation trio, for the architects who shaped the stars themselves. For Arceus did not stop at creating three sovereigns. The universe is vast, and it required hands to build the planets, to kindle the suns, and to hang the moons in their silent orbits. The next chapter of our story begins with those beings who forged the heavens, whose names have been almost entirely forgotten by history, and whose labour is the reason any world exists at all. That is the story of the architects of the stars. With Giratina sealed within the distortion world, the foundations of reality were finally stable. Time flowed in one direction. Space expanded into an infinite canvas, but that canvas remained empty. The void, though ordered, was still a place of absolute darkness, a cold, silent expanse where nothing lived, nothing moved, and nothing could be seen. Arceus had created the bones of existence, but the universe had no skin, no warmth, no light to call its own. And so, from the core of its own being, the original one called forth a new class of deities, not rulers of fundamental forces like Dialga, Palkia, or Giratina, but architects, builders who would take the raw materials of time and space and fashion them into something tangible. These were the secondary creation deities, the hands that would shape the stars. The first among them was Cosmogog, the cosmic architect. Some traditions whisper that Cosmogog was born from Arceus's own desire to see structure beyond the abstract. Where Dialga and Palkia defined the framework, Cosmogog would design the furniture. It was Cosmogog who first envisioned the sweeping arcs of galaxies, the spiral arms of nebulae, and the silent dance of celestial bodies. Its mind worked in dimensions of scale that mortal minds cannot fathom, calculating the precise distances between stars, the gravitational bonds that would hold worlds together, and the orbits that would mark the passage of time for future civilizations. But a design is only as real as the materials that bring it to life. That is where Teratlas entered the story. Teratlas, the world builder, whose domain was the construction of planets themselves. You might imagine Teratlas as a being of immense patience, gathering cosmic dust and gas, the leftover remnants of creation, and compressing them into spheres of rock and metal. It shaped continents, carved oceans, and breathed the first tectonic rhythms into the crust of newborn worlds. Every mountain range, every deep trench in the sea, every volcano that would one day erupt with fire, these were the fingerprints of Teratlas. The foundations for planetary systems were laid, firm and ready, but still they were cold, barren, and dark. And darkness, Arceus understood, was not a condition for life. Life needs light. Life needs warmth. Life needs the promise of a new day and the mystery of a night sky. So Arceus created two more architects, beings of pure radiance and reflection. Their names were Heliosol and Selûne. Heliosol was the first to emerge. Imagine a being whose very form is a sun, an endless blazing sphere of plasma, yet sentient. Heliosol did not simply create stars, it became the template for them. It knew the precise temperature required to sustain fusion, the right amount of gravity to keep a system together, and the perfect spectrum of light that would one day allow plants to photosynthesize and eyes to see color. With every new star it birthed, Heliosol cast away a piece of itself, a fragment of its own fiery essence, until galaxies shimmered with countless points of light. But Heliosol's work was not random. It followed the blueprints laid by Cosmogog, placing suns at the centers of planetary systems, so that Teratlas's worlds would never be left in perpetual night. Then came Selûne. If Heliosol was the blaze of day, Selûne was the cool embrace of night. Selûne's purpose was to create moons. Not just any moons, but celestial mirrors that would capture the light of Heliosol's suns and reflect it gently back upon the planets. Without Selûne, the darkness would still have been absolute once the sun set. With these moons, the worlds would have tides, cycles, and a soft silver luminescence to guide creatures through the hours of shadow. Selûne crafted each moon with care, knowing that the dance between a moon and its planet would create rhythms essential for life. The pull of gravity, the stability of axial tilt, the ebb and flow of oceans. All of these were woven into Selûne's work. Together, the four secondary deities accomplished what Arceus alone could not. Cosmogog mapped the heavens, Teratlas raised the worlds, Heliosol set them ablaze with life-giving fire, and Selûne taught the darkness how to glow. The void, which had once been an endless silent tomb, became a gallery of wonders. Stars flickered to life in constellations that told the first stories. Planets orbited their suns, each a potential home for the life that would someday crawl from the oceans. Moons rose and set, marking the first days and nights. But light alone is not enough to sustain a universe. Energy and matter are only half of the equation. What about the invisible forces that bind hearts together? What about the feelings that drive creatures to build, to love, to fear, to hope? Arceus knew that for its creation to truly thrive, there must be a soul within the cosmos, a spark of consciousness that could experience time and space, not just exist within them. And so, after the architects had finished their grand constructions, Arceus turned its attention to the inner world. It looked at the relationship between Dialga and Palkia, two forces that could clash if left unchecked, and realized that balance would require more than just physical laws. It would require emotion, will, and knowledge. This need gave rise to three new beings, spirits that would dwell not in the stars or on the planets, but within the minds and hearts of every living creature. They would become the guardians of the intangible, the keepers of what makes life worth living. Their story, the story of the lake spirits and the human soul, is one you will want to hear in full, for without them, Even a universe of light would be nothing but an empty stage. With the suns and moons finally set in their celestial dance, Arceus had brought light to the void. But light alone does not make a world worth inhabiting. The cosmos was still silent, still empty of the one thing that could give it meaning, a soul. And so the original one turned its gaze inward, toward the fragile spark of consciousness that would one day define every human and every Pokémon. This was not a creation of raw power like the shaping of time or the forging of dimensions. This was something far more delicate, far more personal. Arceus needed to gift the universe with the very essence of what it means to be alive. At 3 sacred lakes scattered across the region that would one day be called Sinnoh, Arceus planted 3 seeds of pure spirit. At Lake Acuity, a body of water so cold and clear that it reflected the sky like a frozen mirror, Uxie was born. At Lake Valor, where the waters shimmered with the energy of countless battles and passions, Mesprit emerged. And at Lake Verity, a tranquil pool hidden deep within a forest, where truth could be whispered without echo, a Zelf came into being. These were the Lake Guardians, the spirits of knowledge, emotion, and willpower. But they were not created simply to inhabit the world. They were created to inhabit the human soul. Arceus understood that for life to truly flourish, it needed more than instinct. It needed the ability to learn, to feel, and to choose. Knowledge gave humanity the capacity to understand the world around them, to remember the past and plan for the future. Emotion gave them the depth to form bonds, to love, to grieve, to experience joy and sorrow as more than mere chemical reactions. And willpower gave them the strength to act, to overcome adversity, to shape their own destiny. Without these 3 gifts, humans would be nothing more than automatons, moving through existence without purpose. The lake spirits were the vessels through which these qualities flowed into the mortal realm, anchoring the very fabric of consciousness into the physical world. But there was another reason for their creation, one known only to Arceus itself. The creation trio, Dialga, Palkia, and even the banished Giratina, were forces of immense and often volatile power. Time could fracture, space could tear, and antimatter could consume all that existed. Arceus needed a failsafe, a gentle hand that could steady the raging storm when the sovereigns of reality grew enraged. The Lake Guardians were that failsafe. Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf possessed the unique ability to calm either Dialga or Palkia should their fury threaten the balance of the universe. They were the quiet counterweights to the roaring engines of creation, the whispers that could soothe the thunder. It was a secret purpose, hidden even from the lake spirits themselves, until the moment they might be called upon. Each of the 3 spirits took on a distinct role in the grand design. Uxie, the being of knowledge, dwelled in the depths of Lake Acuity, its eyes closed to the world, but its mind open to all truths. It was said that those who touched Uxie would gain perfect understanding of any subject, but at the cost of their own memories, a heavy price for enlightenment. Mesprit, the spirit of emotion, floated above Lake Valor, its form flickering with every feeling it encountered. To meet Mesprit was to experience a flood of raw emotion, overwhelming and pure, a reminder that to feel is to be alive. And Azelf, the embodiment of willpower, rested at the bottom of Lake Verity, its presence a silent beacon of determination. Those who found Azelf often found the strength to pursue their deepest desires, no matter the obstacle. Together, these 3 spirits wove the tapestry of the human soul. Every act of learning, every tear of joy, every decision made against all odds. These were echoes of Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf. They were not distant gods ruling from on high. They were intimate, woven into the very fabric of what it means to be conscious. And yet, they remained hidden. Guardians of the lakes, waiting for the day when their true purpose might be needed. That day would come, as all days do, when the balance of the universe trembled. But before that, another civilization would rise, one that would come to revere these spirits, and the original one who created them. The Celestica people would build their temples, carve their myths, preserve the knowledge of Arceus's gifts, for generations to come. Their story is one of devotion and loss, of a truth so profound it could only be whispered through the ages. And that story is waiting just ahead in the rise of the Celestica, with the gift of knowledge, emotion and willpower now woven into the fabric of humanity. The world was ready for something unprecedented. The lake spirits had anchored these three pillars of consciousness within the hearts of mortal beings. The understanding of where these gifts came from remained a distant whisper, a half-remembered dream. It would take a civilization bold enough to look beyond the horizon of their own existence to truly grasp the source. And that civilization rose from the ancient lands that would one day be called Sinnoh. They called themselves the Celestica. Their name has echoed through the ages, though their voices have long since faded. They were the first people to walk the earth with a clear, unbroken awareness of Arceus, not as a myth, not as a distant force, but as the very foundation of reality. This was the golden age of the first civilization to truly understand Arceus, and in that understanding, they built something that would outlast them all. Before the law was fractured, before the great names of Dialga and Palkia became confused with the original one, the Celestica kept meticulous records. They wrote of the almighty Sinnoh, a title they used not for any created deity, but for Arceus itself. In their scrolls and stone carvings, they described a being of pure light that existed before time had a name, before space had a shape. They spoke of the 1,000 arms that shaped the cosmos, and they knew with a certainty that modern scholars can only envy that the world was a deliberate creation, not a random accident. These ancient records of the almighty Sinnoh, before the law was fractured, reveal a theology far more precise than anything that came after. The Celestica did not worship the forces of time or space as separate gods. They understood that Dialga and Palkia were servants, not masters. They knew that Giratina's exile was a necessary balance, not a punishment. And they revered the lake spirits as the guardians of the human soul, as mere legendaries to be captured and catalogued. Theirs was a complete cosmology, a unified vision of the divine hierarchy that placed Arceus at the center of all things. But knowledge alone was not enough. The Celestica felt a deep, almost aching need to connect with the source of their understanding. They wanted to reach out across the dimensions, to touch the light that had given them consciousness. And so they undertook the most ambitious construction project the ancient world had ever seen. The Temple of Sinnoh. This was not a simple shrine or a place of offerings. The Temple of Sinnoh was designed as a bridge to the divine, built atop the highest peak of Mount Coronet, where the veil between worlds was thinnest. The temple was a masterpiece of sacred geometry, its pillars aligned with the movements of the stars. Its altars were carved from origin ore, a mineral that pulsed with the very essence of Arceus. The Celestica believed that if they built a structure pure enough, precise enough, and powerful enough, the almighty Sinnoh would notice, and perhaps, just perhaps, it would respond. The construction took generations. Families passed down the knowledge of how to shape the stone, how to chant the hymns that kept the builders in harmony with the divine will. Every block was laid with intention. Every corridor was designed to guide a pilgrim soul upward toward the summit where the sky itself seemed to bend. When the temple was finally complete, it stood as a testament to human devotion, a physical manifestation of the Celestica's desire to bridge the gap between mortal and immortal, and for a time it worked. The Celestica recorded that the presence of Arceus could be felt within the temple's inner sanctum. A golden light would sometimes flicker at the altar, and those who meditated there reported visions of the creation itself, the egg emerging from chaos, the first dawn of time, the birth of the stars. They were not merely worshipping a distant god. They were communing with it, but nothing lasts forever. The golden age of the Celestica eventually began to wane. Perhaps it was the natural entropy of all civilizations. Perhaps it was a test from Arceus itself, a reminder that even the greatest understanding is fragile. The records grew sparse. The The temple fell into disrepair, and the knowledge that had been so carefully preserved began to fragment. What remained was a scattering of myths, each clan interpreting the ancient truths in their own way. The Diamond Clan would come to revere Dialga as the supreme being. The Pearl Clan would bow to Palkia, and the true identity of the almighty Sinnoh would be buried under centuries of misunderstanding. The Celestica had built a bridge to the divine, but the bridge was forgotten, and the path became overgrown. Yet the temple itself endured. It would later be known as the Spear Pillar, a place where the boundaries between dimensions remained thin. And though the Celestica faded into legend, their greatest work still stands, waiting for someone to remember what it was truly built for. The next chapter in this story is one of loss and rediscovery, a tale of how the unified lore of the Celestica shattered into fragments, and how those fragments would one day be pieced back together. That story is called The Great Fragmentation, and it begins with a single crack in the foundation of faith. The Celestica civilization reached its zenith in an age of unparalleled understanding. They alone among all mortal peoples had glimpsed the true face of the original one, had recorded its words in temples carved from living stone, and had woven the knowledge of Arceus into the very fabric of their society. But no golden age lasts forever, and the fall of the Celestica was not a sudden cataclysm. It was a slow unravelling, a quiet erosion of truth that began with a single, unanswerable question. The Celestica had always known that Arceus was one. They called it the almighty Sinnoh, the great origin, the source of all that was, is, and ever would be. But as generations passed, the direct contact with the divine faded. The last living witnesses who had spoken with Arceus passed into legend, and their descendants were left with scrolls, carvings and oral traditions that grew more fragmented with each retelling. The mysterious collapse of the Celestica civilization and the loss of truth did not happen overnight. It was a gradual forgetting, a slow drift away from the central pillar of their faith. What caused the collapse? Some say it was a natural disaster, a great upheaval that shattered the land and scattered the people. Others whisper of a schism within the priesthood itself, a dispute over the nature of the divine that could not be reconciled. The records are silent, but the evidence is clear. The Celestica vanished, leaving behind only ruins and echoes. And in the void they left, the knowledge of one God began to fracture, like light passing through a cracked lens. How the knowledge of one God split into the worship of two is a story of human fallibility. Without the Celestica to guide them, the scattered survivors of that ancient world tried to piece together the fragments of truth. They found references to the almighty Sinnoh, but they also found descriptions of two great beings who served the original one who governed time and one who governed space. To the untrained eye, these descriptions seem to describe the creator itself. After all, if Arceus was time and space, then perhaps Dialga and Palkia were simply different names for the same entity, but they were not. The cultural divergence that led to the Diamond and Pearl clans began in this confusion. Two distinct groups emerged, each claiming to preserve the true faith. One group focused on the aspect of time, venerating Dialga as the supreme deity. They called themselves the Diamond Clan, believing that the unyielding crystalline nature of time was the essence of the creator. The other group revered Palkia, the Lord of Space, and named themselves the Pearl Clan, seeing in the vast, fluid expanse of space the true form of the divine. Neither clan realized they had chosen a single piece of a much larger puzzle. For centuries, these two clans lived in the shadow of Mount Coronet, each convinced of their own righteousness. They built their settlements, raised their children, and passed down their beliefs, all while the truth of Arceus grew ever more distant. The Celestica had known that the original one was beyond time and space, that Dialga and Palkia were servants, not masters. But that knowledge was buried beneath the rubble of a fallen civilization, waiting to be rediscovered. The Great Fragmentation was not just a division of people. It was a division of the divine. The one god became two in the minds of mortals, and the unity that had once held the world together was shattered. Yet even in this fractured state, the echoes of the original truth remained. The Temple of Sinnoh, built by the Celestica atop Mount Coronet, still stood as a silent witness, and deep within the earth, veins of origin all pulsed with the essence of Arceus, waiting for someone to remember. But the clans were not the only ones who had lost their way. In the shadows, other forces were stirring. The distortion world held a prisoner who had never forgotten its banishment, and the space-time rifts that would later tear the sky above Hisui were already beginning to form. Ripples from a conflict that had not yet begun. The stage was set for a confrontation that would force the Diamond and Pearl clans to confront their own fallacies. That story, however, belongs to the next chapter. For now, we must leave the clans in their ignorance, standing on the precipice of a revelation that will shake the very foundations of their faith. The Diamond Clan's fallacy is about to be exposed, and the truth they have buried for so long will demand to be heard. The Celestica civilization crumbled, and with it, the unified understanding of the original one. The truth of Arceus, the singular creator, fractured into fragments, each carried by the winds of time to different corners of Hisui. And from those fragments, two new faiths emerged, each built on a piece of the whole, each mistaking a part for the whole. The Diamond Clan and the Pearl Clan rose from the ashes of lost knowledge, and they would spend centuries worshipping echoes instead of the source. The Diamond Clan, in particular, anchored their entire belief system around one concept: time. They called their god Almighty Sinnoh, and they proclaimed it the master of time. To them, the flow of moments, the ticking of the cosmic clock, was the highest expression of divinity. They built their rituals around the cycles of the sun and moon, the turning of seasons, the inevitable march of seconds into years. Their leaders, the Wardens, were chosen for their ability to read the patterns of time, to predict when the noble Pokémon would need calming, when the harvest would be ripe, when the world itself would shift. And at the heart of their faith was a single towering figure, Dialga. But here is the tragedy of the Diamond Clan's fallacy. They did not worship a false god in the sense of a lie. They worshipped a real, powerful, ancient being. Dialga is undeniably the ruler of time, a force so immense that it can slow, accelerate, or reverse the very fabric of existence. When the Diamond Clan looked up at the sky and saw the stars moving in their ancient dance, when they felt the weight of a lifetime passing, they saw Dialga's hand in everything, and they were not wrong about that. Dialga is the master of time, but they were catastrophically wrong about what that meant. The theological error that led them to mistake Dialga for the creator was subtle but absolute. They assumed that because time governs all things, the being who governs time must be the one who made all things. It is a logical leap, but a fatal one. In their devotion to the flow of moments, they forgot that time itself had a beginning. They forgot that before the first second ticked, before the first sunrise, before the first heartbeat, there was only the void, and in that void, a single egg, and from that egg, Arceus. Dialga is a child of that egg, not the egg itself. Dialga is a tool, a magnificent universe-spanning tool, but a tool nonetheless. The Diamond Clan, in their reverence for the clock, forgot the clockmaker. Their rigid traditions only deepened this blindness. The Diamond Clan was a people of order, of repetition, of sacred cycles that must never be broken. They had ceremonies for every phase of the moon, prayers for every equinox, and a strict hierarchy that mirrored the perceived order of time itself. The eldest Wardens were the most respected, because they had witnessed the most seasons. The youngest were taught to listen, to obey, to never question the ancient chants passed down from generation to generation. And those chants, those prayers, all spoke of Almighty Sinnoh as the one who set the world in motion, who wound the clock at the dawn of existence. But the chants were corrupted. They were fragments of the Celestica hymns, rewritten by human hands that no longer understood the full truth. The Diamond Clan never thought to question the source of their scripture. because the scripture itself demanded unquestioning faith. To question time was to question the very ground beneath their feet. So they built their temples, they raised their noble Pokémon, they offered their tributes, all to a god who was not the god. And Dialga, for its part, accepted this worship. It did not correct them. Perhaps it could not. Dialga is not a being of deception, but it is also not a being of revelation. It exists in the river of time, and it does not step out to explain the river's source. The Diamond Clan's prayers reached Dialga, and Dialga responded, in its own way, by maintaining the flow of time, by keeping the world turning. But that response only deepened the misunderstanding. The people saw their prayers answered, saw the seasons continue, saw the stars remain in their courses, and they believed they had found the truth. They had found a truth, but not the whole truth. And so for generations, the Diamond Clan lived in a beautiful, orderly, but incomplete world. They knew the rhythm of existence, but they did not know the composer. They knew the hands of the clock, but they did not know the hand that wound it. Their traditions, their rituals, their entire way of life became a cage of certainty, locking them into a single perspective. They could not see the broader cosmic hierarchy because they had no reason to look. Why would they? Their god was real, their god was powerful, their god answered them. What more could there be? But there was more. There was a space beyond time, a dimension where the clock does not tick. There was a being who existed before the first second, who holds all moments in a single, eternal now. And there was another clan, the Pearl Clan, who had made a different mistake, who worshipped a different fragment, who saw the world not through time, but through space. Their fallacy was the mirror image of the Diamond Clans, and, together, the two clans represented the great fracture of knowledge that had once been whole. To understand the full story, we must now turn our gaze to the Pearl Clan, to their worship of Almighty Sinnoh as the Master of Space, and to the theological error that led them to mistake Palkia for the Creator. Their story is the other side of the same coin, and it holds the key to understanding how the truth was finally, painfully, restored. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious. Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. While the Diamond Clan built their entire cosmology around the ticking heart of time, the Pearl Clan followed a different thread of the same fractured truth. They too had inherited fragments of the Celestica legacy, but where one clan saw the relentless march of moments, the other saw the vast, silent expanse of space itself. And so, in parallel, a second devotion began to crystallize, a worship of the Master of Space. The Pearl Clan's reverence for Palkia was not born from a single revelation, but from a slow organic evolution of belief, shaped by the very land they inhabited. Their territory stretched along the coastlines and across the open plains of Hisui, where the horizon seemed to stretch forever, where the sky met the sea in an unbroken line. For a people who lived under such an immense canopy, it was only natural to look outward, to wonder at the distances between stars, at the emptiness that held everything together. They did not see time as the primary force. They saw space as the container of all existence. Without space, nothing could exist at all. No place for time to flow, no room for life to unfold. And so, when the ancient stories spoke of a great creator, the Pearl Clan interpreted the descriptions through their own lens. The almighty Sinnoh of legend was described as having dominion over all things. But which aspect of all things was most fundamental? For the Pearl Clan, it was the fabric of reality itself, the ability to stretch, fold and hold the universe. They found their answer in Palkia, the Pokémon said to govern space. To them, Palkia was not merely a powerful being. It was the very embodiment of the Creator's spatial essence. They believed that by worshipping Palkia, they were honouring the true face of Arceus. This parallel evolution of devotion is a fascinating study in how human perception shapes theology. Both clans started from the same source, the fragmented records of the Celestica. Both clans sought to understand the one true God, but because the truth was broken, each clan latched onto a different piece of the puzzle and then built an entire belief system around that single fragment. The Diamond Clan saw time as the primary attribute of the Creator. The Pearl Clan saw space. Neither was wrong in their reverence for a divine force, but both were incomplete. And in that incompleteness, a rivalry was born. The rivalry between the Diamond and Pearl clans was not merely a territorial dispute or a clash of cultures. It was a theological war fought over two halves of a single truth. Each clan believed with absolute certainty that they alone understood the nature of the almighty Sinnoh. To the Diamond Clan, the Pearl Clan's worship of a spatial deity was a dangerous heresy, a misdirection that could anger the true Creator. To the Pearl Clan, the Diamond Clan's obsession with time was a narrow, almost childish view of a god whose domain was far more expansive. They could not see that they were both reaching for the same divine hand, just from different angles. This conflict was not born of malice, but of love, a fierce, protective love for their understanding of the divine. The clans would argue, sometimes violently, over whose rituals were correct, whose prayers would be answered, whose deity was the true master of the world. They built their societies around these beliefs. The Pearl Clan's architecture often featured open, airy structures that seemed to embrace the sky, while their ceremonies focused on the boundaries between places. On the act of crossing from one space to another, they saw Palkia's hand in every mountain range that divided the land, every river that carved a path through the earth, every star that hung in the night sky. But here is the tragic irony. Palkia, for all its immense power, never asked to be worshipped. It was never meant to be a god in the way the Pearl Clan imagined. Palkia was a creation of Arceus, a tool designed to maintain the spatial dimensions of the universe. It had no desire for altars or prayers. It simply existed, performing its cosmic duty, unaware that a mortal civilization had mistaken it for the Creator. Palkia became an unintended proxy for Arceus's worship, a stand-in deity that bore the weight of human devotion without ever understanding why. This is the central tragedy of the Pearl Clan's misconception. They poured their hearts into a faith that was not false, but misplaced. Their prayers were not unheard. They simply reached the wrong ears. Palkia, in its own way, may have responded to their reverence, not because it understood their theology, but because it was a being of immense power that could sense the energy of their devotion. The Pearl Clan's rituals, their offerings, their songs of praise, all of it was directed at a being that was not the source, but a reflection of the source. And yet, the Pearl Clan's devotion was not without its own beauty. In their worship of space, they developed a profound respect for the interconnectedness of all things. They saw the world not as a series of events strung together by time, but as a vast, living tapestry where every point was connected to every other point. They understood that distance was not a barrier, but a relationship. Their shamans would meditate on the spaces between objects, on the emptiness that held the stars, and they would feel the presence of something vast and silent. They called it Palkia, but perhaps they were touching something even greater. The spatial essence of Arceus itself, filtered through the lens of their own culture. The Pearl Clan's misconception, like that of the Diamond Clan, was a natural consequence of the great fragmentation. When the Celestica civilization fell, the unified knowledge of Arceus shattered into 1,000 pieces. Each piece was carried away by the winds of time, landing in different valleys, different minds, different hearts, and in each place, that piece was reassembled into a new whole, shaped by the landscape and the people who found it. The Pearl Clan built their faith around the peace that spoke of space, just as the Diamond Clan built theirs around time. They were both right, and they were both wrong, and so, the stage was set for a conflict that would echo through the ages. A conflict not between good and evil, but between two incomplete visions of the same divine reality. The Pearl Clan would continue to worship Palkia, unaware that their god was a servant, not the master. The Diamond Clan would cling to Dialga, blind to the same truth, and between them, the true story of Arceus lay buried, waiting for someone to piece it back together. But before that reconciliation could happen, another legend would rise from the ashes of the Celestica. A story of a hero who faced the Almighty directly, armed with blessings from 10 noble Pokémon. That story, the legend of the ancient hero, holds the key to understanding why the Temple of Sinnoh was built, and what truly happened when a mortal dared to stand before the original one. The Pearl Clan, for all their devotion, had built their faith around a half-truth. They gazed up at the sky, at the endless expanse of space, and they called it Sinnoh. They felt the presence of something vast, something that held the stars in their places, and they named it their god. But the one they worshipped was not the original one. It was Palkia, the master of space, a being of immense power, yes, but still a creation. And so, two clans, the Diamond and the Pearl, stood divided by a single misunderstanding, each clutching a fragment of a much larger truth. But before the clans ever existed, before the Celestica civilization crumbled into dust and legend, there was a time when the truth was whole, and in that time, a mortal did what no human had ever done before. They stood against a god. The legend of the ancient hero is one of the most hauntingly incomplete stories in all of Sinnoh's history. It is a tale whispered in the oldest of texts, carved into stones that have long since been worn smooth by wind and rain. The Celestica people recorded it with reverence, but even they, the keepers of the original knowledge, left us only fragments. What we know is this: a human being, a mortal of flesh and blood, once challenged Arceus itself. Not out of arrogance, not out of a desire for conquest, but for a purpose that has been lost to the ages. Some say the hero sought to prove the worth of humanity. Others say they were chosen by Arceus to undergo a trial. But the most compelling evidence points to something far more profound. The hero was blessed by 10 noble Pokémon, each one granted a fragment of power directly from Lord Sinnoh himself. These 10 noble Pokémon were not ordinary. They were chosen, elevated, and imbued with a strength that could rival the lesser gods. Each one represented a different aspect of the natural world, a different virtue, a different force. The ancient trial of strength was not a battle of brute force alone. It was a test of harmony, of balance, of the ability to channel the will of the Creator through the bond between human and Pokémon. The hero did not fight alone. They stood at the center of a storm of power, guided by the 10 nobles, each one a living conduit for Arceus' own energy. The very land of Hisui trembled as this confrontation unfolded. The sky split, the mountains groaned, and at the heart of it all, a mortal faced the alpha Pokémon. But why? What was the true purpose of this battle? The Celestica records hint at something we have almost forgotten. The hero was not trying to defeat Arceus. That would have been impossible. No, the hero was trying to earn something, a blessing, a recognition. The blessing of Lord Sinnoh was not simply a gift of power, it was a covenant. Arceus, in its infinite wisdom, chose to test humanity through this single champion. If the hero could withstand the presence of the original one, if they could prove that mortals were worthy of the knowledge, emotion, and willpower that the lake spirits had given them, then Arceus would grant humanity a place in the cosmic order. The hero's battle was a ritual of validation. It was the moment when the divine and the mortal met, and the mortal did not break. The outcome of that battle has been deliberately erased from history. We do not know if the hero succeeded or failed. The Temple of Sinnoh, later known as the Spear Pillar, was built to honor this event, but the temple itself is a monument to a mystery. The Celestica people chose to leave the ending unwritten. Perhaps they believed that the answer was not meant for us. Perhaps the hero's true victory was simply that they tried, and in that attempt, they proved that humanity could stand in the presence of a god and not be consumed. The 10 noble Pokémon, after the trial, returned to their domains, their power spent but their purpose fulfilled. They became the guardians of the land, watching over the regions that would one day be called Hisui. The The hero vanished from the records, their name lost, their face unknown. They became a legend, a shadow, a whisper in the wind. But the story does not end there. The blessing of Lord Sinnoh was not a one-time event. It left a residue, a trace of divine energy that lingered in the world. That energy took a physical form, a substance so rare and so potent that it could only have come from Arceus itself. It was called Origin Ore, and its true nature, its connection to the ancient hero, and its role in the events that would unfold centuries later is a mystery that we are only beginning to understand. In the next chapter, we will delve into the depths of that mystery and uncover what the Origin Ore truly is and why it holds the key to everything. The ancient hero who stood against Arceus wielded more than just courage and the blessing of 10 noble Pokémon. That battle, whose outcome has been lost to time, left behind something far more tangible than legend. It left behind a substance so rare, so charged with divine essence, that it would become the foundation of every sacred artifact the mortal world would ever know. This is the story of the Origin Ore, deep within the mountains of Hisui, where the earth remembers the touch of the original one. Miners and mystics alike spoke of veins of crystal that glowed with an inner light. These were no ordinary gemstones. When the Celestica civilization first uncovered them, they realized they had found something that defied all natural law. The ore pulsed with a faint rhythmic luminescence, as if it were alive, and in a way, it was. The crystalline essence contained within the Origin Ore was nothing less than a fragment of Arceus' own power, a physical echo of the moment creation itself began. The discovery of this crystalline essence changed everything. For centuries, the Celestic had worshipped Arceus from a distance, knowing only that the almighty Sinnoh existed beyond time and space. But here in their hands was a material that hummed with the same energy that had shaped the universe. It was as if a single drop of the primordial light had been captured in stone. The Celestica scholars soon learned that the ore could be shaped, heated, and infused with intent. It could hold a charge of will, and that realization bridged the impossible gap between mortal technology and divine energy. Think about what that meant. Human hands, working with human tools, could now touch the fabric of creation. The ore did not simply conduct power, it resonated with it. When forged into tools, it allowed the user to channel a fraction of Arceus' authority over reality. A smith could hammer a blade that could cut through the boundary between dimensions. A priest could carve a plate that, when held, would attune the bearer to a specific aspect of nature. The Celestica called these items sacred artifacts, and they were the first of their kind. The most famous of these artifacts were the plates themselves, 17 discs of Origin Ore, each inscribed with symbols that represented a different type of energy: fire, water, grass, electric, and so on. When Arceus held a plate, its form would shift, adapting to the essence of that type. But the plates were not the only creations. The Celestica also forged the Azure Flute, a slender instrument carved from a single crystal of pure Origin Ore. Its notes were said to resonate at the same frequency as the Hall of Origin, the dimension where Arceus dwells. To play the flute was to call out across the void, to knock on the door of the Creator's own home. But the ore's role in the forging of the first sacred artifacts went beyond mere tools. It was also used to create the Origin Ball, a sphere capable of containing even a god. The Celestica understood that capturing Arceus was not an act of domination, but of communion. The ball was designed to hold the divine essence without corrupting it, a vessel of perfect balance, and it was only possible because the Origin Ore served as a bridge, a material that existed simultaneously in the mortal realm and the divine. Yet the knowledge of how to work the ore did not survive the fall of the Celestica civilization. When their golden age crumbled, the secrets of the forge were scattered. The Diamond and Pearl clans inherited fragments of the lore, but they no longer understood the true nature of the material. They mistook the ore for a gift from their respective false deities, Dialga and Palkia. The plates became relics of a forgotten science, their true purpose obscured by time. But the ore itself never lost its power. It lay dormant in the earth, waiting, and in the era of the Hisui region, when the space-time rift tore open above Mount Coronet, the origin ore began to pulse again. It responded to the chaos, to the raw energy spilling from the rift. The ancient crystalline essence, still containing Arceus's power, was the key to stabilizing the world once more. That is the mystery of the origin ore, a substance born from the very moment of creation, shaped by mortal hands into artifacts that could touch the infinite. It is the thread that ties the divine to the mundane, the proof that Arceus did not simply abandon the world after shaping it. The creator left pieces of itself behind, embedded in the stone of Hisui, waiting for those who would listen to the song of the azure flute and find their way to the Hall of Origin. The previous chapter left us holding a fragment of something ancient and incomprehensible: the origin ore, a crystalline essence that pulses with the very power of the original one. We traced how this mysterious material bridges the gap between mortal technology and divine energy, how it was shaped into tools and weapons by the Celestica people, and how it still hums with a frequency that seems to resonate with the fabric of creation itself. But the origin ore is not the only artifact that connects our world to the realm of gods. There is another, far rarer, far more elusive, an object that does not merely channel power, but unlocks a door, the azure flute. To understand what this flute truly is, we must first ask a question that the ancient Celestica scribes spent lifetimes contemplating. What is the sound that opens the heavens? Not a metaphor, not a poetic flourish, but a literal vibration, a specific pitch, a sequence of notes that can tear the veil between dimensions. The metaphysical significance of the sound that opens the heavens cannot be overstated. In the cosmology of the Pokémon world, sound is not merely a wave traveling through air. It is a fundamental force, a thread that weaves through the fabric of space-time itself. When Arceus first shaped the universe, it is said that the original one spoke, or perhaps sang, the first word, and from that utterance, matter and energy coalesced. The azure flute is a relic that echoes that primordial note. But the flute is not an instrument anyone can play. It requires a breath of pure intent, a soul aligned with the harmony of creation. The Celestica civilization understood this. They crafted the flute from a material that could withstand the resonance of divine frequencies, likely infused with origin ore, though the records are incomplete. When played correctly, the flute does not produce a melody that human ears can fully perceive. Instead, it generates a frequency that resonates with the dimensional barrier that separates our world from the Hall of Origin. And that barrier, as we shall see, is not a wall of stone or energy. It is a threshold of worthiness. Why does Arceus reside in a dimension of golden light above Mount Coronet? The answer is woven into the very geography of Sinnoh. Mount Coronet is not merely a mountain. It is the spine of the region, the axis mundi, the point where the forces of time and space were first anchored by Dialga and Palkia. Above its peak, the sky often shimmers with an auroral glow, a phenomenon the ancient peoples called the light of Sinnoh. But that light is not a natural occurrence. It is the faint spillover from the Hall of Origin, a pocket dimension that exists just outside the boundaries of our reality. Arceus dwells there because it is a place where time and space do not apply, a sanctuary of pure potential, where the original one can observe the universe it created without being constrained by its laws. The Hall of Origin appears as an endless expanse of golden light, with a crystalline floor that reflects the cosmos. There are no walls, no ceiling, no horizon, only an infinite radiance that seems to emanate from Arceus itself. This is not a throne room built by hands or even by divine will. It is the natural state of the Creator's presence, a realm that exists because Arceus exists. To step into that hall is to stand in the presence of the source of all existence. And that is precisely why a mortal cannot simply walk up Mount Coronet and demand an audience. The path is barred not by a locked gate, but by a test of the soul. The requirements for a mortal to be deemed worthy of an audience with Arceus are not arbitrary. They are woven into the very fabric of the journey that any challenger must undertake. First, one must prove mastery over the fundamental forces of the universe, time and space themselves. This means not merely defeating Dialga and Palkia, but understanding them, calming them, earning their respect. Second, one must demonstrate balance, the ability to harmonize the three aspects of the soul represented by Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf: knowledge, emotion, and willpower. Only by awakening and capturing all three late guardians can a mortal prove that they possess the inner equilibrium necessary to stand before the Creator without being consumed. But even that is not enough. The final requirement is the most subtle and the most profound. The mortal must have walked the path of the ancient hero, must have faced the trials set by the 10 noble Pokémon, and must have proven that they are not seeking power for selfish ends. Arceus does not judge worthiness by strength alone. It judges by intent. The Azure Flute will only produce its true sound when held by someone who seeks not to conquer, but to understand. Someone who has seen the suffering caused by the space-time rift, who has quelled the frenzied nobles, who has faced the betrayal of Volo and the rage of Giratina, and who has emerged not with a desire for dominion, but with a quiet resolve to restore balance. When that mortal finally stands at the summit of Mount Coronet, beneath the auroral glow, and raises the Azure Flute to their lips, the sound that emerges is not a melody they choose. It is a response, a resonance that matches the frequency of their own soul. If the soul is pure, the heavens open. A staircase of golden light descends from the sky, each step solidifying as the player climbs, until they enter the Hall of Origin, and there in the infinite light, Arceus waits. But what happens when the mortal is not pure? What happens when the one who seeks the Creator is driven by vengeance, or by a hunger for godhood? That is a story we have only glimpsed in fragments, a conspiracy that unfolded in the shadows of Hisui, led by a man who believed he could rewrite the very will of Arceus. His name was Volo, and his plan would tear open the sky and unleash a force that even the original one could not ignore. That story, the Volo conspiracy, is the subject of our next chapter. The Azure Flute is more than an instrument. It is a key to a door that should never have been opened, and yet for all its sacred mystery, the flute itself is merely a tool. The real question has always been, who would dare to play it? In the ancient records of the Celestica, the flute was kept hidden, its melody known only to the pure of heart. But purity is a fragile thing, and ambition can wear the mask of devotion for a very long time before it reveals its true face. There was a man named Volo. He was a merchant by trade, a scholar by obsession, and a worshipper of Arceus by declaration. He travelled the length of Hisui, collecting fragments of old texts, deciphering the carvings on forgotten ruins, and piecing together a picture of the divine that no one else had ever assembled. To the clans, he was a helpful wanderer, a man with a kind smile and an endless supply of questions. But beneath that courteous exterior, something far darker was taking root. Volo had come to understand something that the Diamond and Pearl clans had never grasped. They worshipped Dialga and Palkia as the almighty Sinnoh, but Volo knew better. He had read the oldest inscriptions, the ones that spoke of a being beyond time and space, a creator who had shaped the very fabric of reality with 1,000 arms. And he had also read the warnings. The Celestica had known that to seek Arceus directly was to invite catastrophe, but Volo was not deterred. He saw the warnings as challenges, and the challenges as stepping stones to a destiny he believed was his by right. The descent of a scholar into madness is rarely a sudden fall. It is a gradual erosion of reason, a slow poisoning of the soul by forbidden knowledge. Volo began to see the world not as it was, but as a flawed creation. He looked at the suffering of Pokémon, the conflicts between humans, the chaos that sometimes spilled from the mountains, and he concluded that Arceus had made a mistake. The world was imperfect, and the only way to fix it was to force the Creator to start over, to unmake everything and remake it anew, this time according to a design that Volo himself would help shape. But how could a mortal compel a god? The answer lay in the one who had been cast out. Giratina, the banished dragon, the ruler of the distortion world, had been locked away for its violent nature. It was a being of pure antimatter, a shadow that existed in the spaces between reality, and it hated Arceus with a hatred that had festered for eons. Volo found a way to reach it. Through ancient rites and a pact sealed in blood and obsession, he bound his will to Giratina's. The dragon would lend him its power, and in return, Volo would open a path for Giratina to strike at the heart of the divine order. The pact with the banished dragon was not a partnership of equals. Volo believed he was using Giratina, but in truth, the dragon was using him. Giratina's rage was a weapon, and Volo's ambition was the trigger. Together, they would tear open the sky above Mount Coronet, creating a rift that would unravel the very laws of time and space. That rift was not a simple crack in the atmosphere. It was a wound in reality itself, a bleeding gash through which the distortion world began to pour into Hisui. The sky turned a sickly violet, and strange violent storms erupted across the region. Noble Pokémon, once calm and blessed by Arceus, were driven into frenzies by the imbalance. Dialga and Palkia themselves, the guardians of time and space, began to rage, their minds twisted by the chaos that Volo had unleashed. The opening of the space-time rift and the descent of Hisui into chaos was not an accident. It was the first step in Volo's plan. He knew that Arceus would not remain silent while its creation was torn apart. The creator would have to intervene, and when it did, Volo would be waiting. He had studied the legends of the ancient hero, the one who had once battled Arceus and survived. He knew about the 10 noble Pokémon, the Origin Ore, the Azure Flute. He had gathered all the pieces, and now he needed only one more thing: a vessel, a mortal who could be manipulated, guided, and ultimately used to draw Arceus out into the open. That vessel would come from the rift itself. A boy, grown through time and space, with no memory of his past and no knowledge of the world he had landed in. He would be called Ray, and he would be the instrument of Volo's salvation or destruction, depending on how the pieces fell. But that is a story for another chapter. For now, the sky above Hisui is torn, the clans are in chaos, and a man who once smiled at travelers is standing at the summit of Mount Coronet, holding a flute that was never meant to be played by human hands. He is out to call down a god, and he is not afraid, because he believes he has already won. But the stranger from the rift has not yet made his choice, and in that choice lies the only hope for a world that is already beginning to unravel. Volo's conspiracy had reached its breaking point. The pact with the banished dragon had torn a wound across the sky above Mount Coronet, a rift that bled light and shadow, twisting the very fabric of space and time. The people of Hisui looked up in terror as the heavens split open, and from that chasm something stirred. Not a god, not a monster, but a figure falling through the fracture between worlds. A stranger, tumbling out of the future into a land that had no name for them yet. This was no accident. The rift was not merely a scar left by Giratina's rage. It was a doorway, and through it, Arceus had reached across the ages to pull a single human being into the heart of its ancient design. You see, the original one does not act without purpose. Every ripple in the fabric of reality is a calculated stroke in a game that spans eons. And in that game, the stranger from the rift was a pawn, but a pawn with the potential to become something far greater. The moment Ray, or Akari, depending on the vessel, landed in the snow of the obsidian fieldlands, they were not alone. A faint glow pulsed from their person, a device they had never seen before. It was not a Pokédex, as the people of Hisui would later call it. It was something older, something woven from the same golden light that shimmered in the Hall of Origin, the Arc Phone, a direct line to the creator itself. And then the voice came, not as sound, but as a certainty pressed into the mind, a presence that filled every thought with an impossible clarity. Arceus spoke, not in words of any human tongue, but in pure intention. It said, "You have been chosen. Seek out all Pokémon. Prove that the spirit of humanity is worthy of the trust I have placed in you." This was not a request. It was a mission, a test of the human spirit, written into the very soul of the stranger. Arceus had seen the chaos Volo had unleashed, the distortion spreading through time and space. It had witnessed the ancient heroes' battle long ago, and knew that mortals could rise to meet the divine. But could they do it again? Could one soul, plucked from a future that did not yet exist, gather every creature that had ever been shaped by the original one's will? The Arc phone pulsed with a map of the Hisui region, marking the locations of Pokémon unknown to the local clans. It was a guide, a leash, and a promise. Every capture, every battle, every moment of discovery was a step toward the summit of Mount Coronet, where Arceus waited in its dimension of golden light. The stranger was not alone. They would be aided by the Galaxy team, by the surviving members of the Diamond and Pearl clans, by the very nobles that had once served the ancient hero. But the weight of the mission rested on their shoulders alone, and yet the stranger did not know the full truth. They did not know that Volo, the merchant with the gentle smile and the ancient knowledge, was already watching. They did not know that Giratina lurked in the shadows of the distortion world, feeding the rift with its antimatter. They did not know that the 10 noble Pokémon, once blessed by Arceus itself, had fallen into a frenzy. Their minds twisted by the rift's influence, their bodies burning with uncontrollable rage. That frenzy would be the first trial, the first test of whether this pawn could truly become a player in the divine game. For the stranger from the rift, the path ahead was clear: quell the nobles, seal the rift, and stand before the Creator. But the road would be paved with the madness of gods and the schemes of men, and the very first step would lead them into the heart of a forest where a massive, enraged beast thrashed against the bonds of its own blessing. A frenzy that would demand everything they had to give. The stranger from the rift had arrived in Hisui with nothing but the clothes on their back, and a strange device that glowed with a light not of this world. Arceus had chosen them, spoken to them through that Arc phone, and set them on a path that would reshape the region. But before they could face the god of all creation, they had to understand the chaos tearing the land apart. And that chaos began with the nobles. You see, the 10 noble Pokémon were not ordinary creatures. They were the blessed companions of the ancient hero, the mortal who once stood before Arceus, and proved that humanity could be worthy of divine trust. Each noble had been granted a fragment of Arceus' own power, a spark of the original one's essence that elevated them far above their kin. For generations, these Pokémon served as guardians of Hisui, protectors of the clans, living symbols of the covenant between mortals and the divine. They were revered, worshipped even, and their blessings were sought for harvests, journeys, and battles. But then the rift appeared. The space-time tear above Mount Coronet was not merely a scar in the sky. It was a wound in the fabric of reality itself, and from that wound bled a corrosive energy that seeped into the land like poison seeping into a river. This energy did not discriminate. It twisted the minds of Pokémon, drove them mad with a fury that had no source and no reason. And the nobles, those closest to the divine, were the first to fall. Think of it. The descendants of the hero's companions, the very Pokémon that had stood alongside a mortal in the presence of Arceus, were now thrashing in a frenzy that defied all understanding. Clever, the scyther that had been blessed with stone-hard blades, rampaged through the obsidian fieldlands, its eyes glowing red, strikes wild and indiscriminate. Lilligant, the graceful flower of the crimson mylands, now whipped its petals into a storm of razor-sharp fury. Arcanine, the noble fire dog that had once guided travellers safely through the mountains, now blazed a trail of destruction across the Cobalt coastlands. One by one, the nobles succumbed, and with each fall, the people of Hisui watched their faith crumble. This was not just a crisis of safety, it was a theological catastrophe. The Diamond and Pearl clans had built their entire worldview around the nobles. They believed these Pokémon were direct emissaries of the almighty Sinnoh, the name they gave to the creator they barely understood. When a noble went mad, It was not seen as a sickness or a corruption. It was seen as divine judgment. The clan leaders, the wardens, the common folk, they all asked the same question. What have we done to anger the gods? Why are our protectors turning against us? Some whispered that the hero's ancient sin had finally caught up with them. Others claimed that the stranger from the rift was a curse, a punishment for allowing an outsider into their sacred land. The air grew thick with fear and suspicion, and the very fabric of Hisui society began to fray. But the truth was far more mundane and far more terrifying. The nobles were not angry. They were not punishing anyone. They were sick. The rift's energy had infected them, overriding their will, drowning their consciousness in a sea of raw, undirected power. They could no more control their rampages than a wildfire can choose which trees to burn, and without intervention, they would eventually burn themselves out, their bodies unable to contain the divine energy that now raged within them. That is where the player came in. The stranger from the rift, armed with the Arc Phone and a knowledge of the world that no one in Hisui possessed, was given a task that seemed impossible. Restore the nobles to sanity. But how do you calm a god? You cannot reason with a creature that no longer recognizes you. You cannot bargain with a mind consumed by madness. The answer, as it turned out, lay in the very substance that had caused the corruption. The balms were not medicine in the traditional sense. They were crafted from materials infused with the energy of the rift itself, but in a purified, concentrated form. By hurling these balms at a frenzied noble, the player could counteract the corrupting influence, slowly chipping away at the madness until the Pokémon's true nature reasserted itself. It was a delicate, dangerous process. Each noble had to be faced in its own domain. Its rage met not with violence but with precision and patience. The player had to learn the patterns of the frenzy, the tells of an incoming attack, the moments when the noble was vulnerable, and then, in a flash of light and a burst of purified energy, the madness would break and the noble would collapse, exhausted but free. Each victory was a miracle. Each noble calmed was a crack in the wall of despair that had been building around the clans. The wardens wept, the people jeered, and slowly the theological crisis began to ease. The nobles were not angry gods. They were wounded children of the divine, and the stranger had healed them. The faith of the clans was not destroyed, it was transformed. They began to see the player not as a curse, but as a blessing, a new hero sent to complete the work of the old one. But the rift still gaped above Mount Coronet, and as the last noble was calmed, a deeper, darker truth began to surface. The madness of the nobles was only a symptom. The true disease lay in the heart of the mountain, where two ancient beings, Dialga and Palkia, were locked in a battle that threatened to tear time and space apart. The player had proven themselves worthy of the task. Now they would have to face the very forces that ruled reality itself. That confrontation would become known as the Battle of the Temple, and it would test not only the player's strength, but the very meaning of the bond between mortal and god. The frenzy of the nobles had torn Hisui apart, but the space-time rift above Mount Coronet was only a symptom of a deeper fracture. The true source of the chaos was not the corrupted descendants of the hero's companions. It was the gods themselves, driven mad by the rift's influence, and the mortal leaders who had spent generations worshipping the wrong deities. As the sky churned with crimson and violet light, the Diamond and Pearl clans converged on the summit of Mount Coronet, each believing they were about to witness the glory of their almighty Sinnoh. But what they found instead was a confrontation that would shatter their faith forever. The Temple of Sinnoh, the ancient structure built to honor the legendary hero who once battled Arceus, stood silent beneath the fractured heavens. Its stone pillars, carved with symbols of time and space, had witnessed centuries of prayer and misunderstanding. Now, the leaders of the Diamond and Pearl clans faced each other across the altar, their voices rising above the howling wind. The Diamond leader, clad in blue, spoke of Dialga, the entity they called the Lord of Time, the true creator. The Pearl leader, draped in white, countered with Palkia, the Lord of Space, the architect of reality. Neither would yield. Neither understood that they were both wrong. And then the dragons answered their summons. From the rift above, two forms descended, not as the familiar beasts of legend, but as something far more terrible. Dialga and Palkia emerged in their origin forms, bodies reshaped into crystalline, serpentine silhouettes that pulsed with raw, unbridled power. Dialga's form became a shimmering azure diamond, its limbs replaced by flowing ribbons of temporal energy, its chest glowing with the heart of a clockwork universe. Palkia's shape twisted into a pearlescent spiral, its arms dissolving into strands of spatial distortion, its core a vortex of collapsing stars. They were no longer the guardians of time and space. They were avatars of pure creation, desperate and broken. The origin forms are not natural. They are a mimicry, a desperate attempt by Dialga and Palkia to reshape themselves in the image of their creator. Look at the silhouette, the central body, the flowing appendages, the radiant core. It is Arceus' own form, distorted and refracted through the lens of time and space. The dragons, driven mad by the rift and by their own jealousy, tried to become the original one. They tried to absorb the power that was never meant for them, and in doing so, they revealed the truth that the Diamond and Pearl clans had refused to see. That their gods were not gods at all, but children reaching for a father they could never equal. The confrontation at the summit became a battle for the fate of reality itself. Dialga roared and time fractured, the past, present and future bleeding into one another. Palkia screamed and space tore, the temple's pillars bending into impossible geometries, the sky folding like paper. The leaders of the clans fell to their knees, not in worship, but in terror. They had summoned their deities, and their deities had answered with annihilation. The temple, once a place of reverence, became a crucible where the very fabric of existence was tested. And yet, amid the chaos, a figure stood at the edge of the summit, a stranger from the rift, guided by the light of the Arcphone. Ray or Akari, depending on which telling you follow, had been sent by Arceus itself to restore balance. But before the stranger could act, the dragons turned their fury upon each other. Dialga and Palkia clashed, their origin forms colliding in a burst of white light that threatened to consume the mountain. The world trembled. The rift above widened, and for a moment, it seemed as though all of creation would unravel. But the battle at the temple was only the beginning. The dragons, in their desperate mimicry, had revealed their weakness. They were not Arceus. They could not hold the universe together, and as the summit crumbled, a new artifact was being prepared, one forged from the very essence of the original one. The Origin Ball, a vessel capable of containing the divine, would soon be revealed, and with it, the stranger would face a choice that could either save Hisui or doom it forever. The two dragons stood at the summit of Mount Coronet, their origin forms blazing with raw, uncontained power. Dialga's crystalline body pulsed with the rhythm of time itself, each beat a heartbeat of the universe, while Palkia's pearl-like shell rippled with the curvature of space, bending the very air around it into shimmering distortions. The leaders of the Diamond and Pearl clans, Adaman and Irida, had just witnessed their deepest beliefs shattered. For generations, their ancestors had worshipped these beings as the almighty Sinnoh, the divine creator of all. But now, standing before them, the truth was undeniable. Dialga and Palkia were not the original god. They were something else, powerful beyond measure, yes, but not the source. They were guardians, rulers of fundamental forces. But they were not the one who had shaped the cosmos from nothing. And yet, the rift above the temple continued to tear the sky apart. The space-time distortion that had first appeared months ago, a wound in reality that bled crimson and violet light, was widening. The enraged dragons were not the cause. They were symptoms. Something deeper, something darker, had driven them to this frenzy. The true culprit was the influence of the distortion world, seeping through the rift like poison, and the malevolent will of the being that had been banished there long ago, Giratina. But before anyone could confront that ultimate darkness, The immediate crisis had to be contained. The dragons were rampaging, their power threatening to unravel the fabric of the Hisui region. And so, a plan was set in motion. A plan that would require the crafting of a vessel capable of containing the essence of a deity. This was no ordinary Pokeball. The people of Hisui, guided by the ancient knowledge of the Celestica civilization and the direct intervention of Arceus himself, knew that to capture a being like Dialga or Palkia, you needed something far more than metal and wood. You needed a container infused with the very essence of the original one, the Origin Ball. The process was a closely guarded secret, whispered only among the most trusted craftsmen and scholars. It required Origin Ore, a rare mineral that pulsed with the same golden light that emanated from Arceus' own form. This ore was said to be fragments of the original spirit, scattered across the land when Arceus first shaped the universe. The Celestica people had once known how to refine it, how to weave its power into tools and artifacts, but that knowledge had been lost for centuries, buried beneath the ruins of their civilization. Yet, in the chaos of the rift, fragments of that ancient wisdom resurfaced. Professor Laventon, the eccentric researcher who had documented the region's Pokémon, pieced together clues from old texts and the cryptic messages left by Arceus on the Arc phone. The crafting of the Origin Ball was not just a matter of forging, it was a ritual. The ball had to be imbued with the intention of containment, with the understanding that you were not trying to harm the deity, but to hold it, to calm it, to restore balance. The materials were gathered: a core of Origin Ore, a shell of black stone from the depths of Mount Coronet, and a binding agent made from the tears of the late guardians, Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf. These three spirits, created by Arceus to govern knowledge, emotion, and willpower, had been watching the conflict from afar. Their tears, shed in sorrow for the suffering of the dragons, held the power to soothe even the most enraged divine beast. When the Origin Ball was finally completed, it glowed with a soft, pulsating light, as if it were alive. It was not a weapon. It was a sanctuary, a temporary prison, yes, but one designed to heal, not to destroy. The capture of the enraged dragons was a delicate operation. Ray, the young stranger from the future, chosen by Arceus, stood at the summit, the Origin Ball in hand. The air around him crackled with energy. Dialga roared, its cry bending time, so that the sound seemed to come from both the past and the future simultaneously. Palkia shrieked, and space folded around it, creating a maze of impossible geometries. But Ray did not waver. He had been guided by the Arc phone, by the telepathic whispers of Arceus, and by the support of the clans. He threw the Origin Ball at Dialga first. The ball struck the dragon's crystalline armor and opened, releasing a wave of golden light. For a moment, Dialga resisted, its body convulsing as time itself tried to reject the containment. But the power of the Origin Ore, combined with the tears of the late guardians, overwhelmed its fury. Dialga was drawn into the ball, and the ball clicked shut. A silence fell over the summit. The rift above flickered, but did not close. Palkia, seeing its counterpart captured, grew even more enraged. Space twisted violently, and the ground beneath Ray's feet began to warp. He threw the second Origin Ball, but this one was different. It had been crafted with a special modification, a binding that could hold both dragons if necessary. The ball struck Palkia, and again the golden light erupted. Palkia fought harder, its facial distortions creating ripples that threatened to tear the ball apart. But the will of Arceus, channeled through the vessel, held firm. With a final shuddering pulse, Palkia too was sealed. The two Origin Balls lay on the stone floor of the temple, glowing faintly. The dragons were contained, temporarily. The rift did not close, but it stopped growing. The sky began to clear, the crimson and violet hues fading to a bruised purple. The immediate danger was over, but the deeper revelation had only just begun. As the clans gathered, shaken and confused, the truth began to dawn on them. The almighty Sinnoh they had worshipped for generations was not Dialga. It was not Palkia. It was something far older, far more powerful, and far more mysterious. The dragons were not gods. They were servants. They were the first creations of the original one, given dominion over time and space. But they were not the source of all things. The realization hit Adaman and Irida like a physical blow. Their entire faith, the foundation of their cultures, had been built on a misunderstanding. The Diamond Clan had revered Dialga as the creator. The Pearl Clan had revered Palkia, but both were wrong. The true almighty Sinnoh was Arceus, the being that had emerged from the egg in the void, the one who had shaped the universe with 1,000 arms, the one who now watched from a dimension beyond time and space. And Arceus was not done. The rift remained a scar on reality. The distortion world still bled into Hisui, and the one who had orchestrated this chaos, Volo, the scholar who had made a pact with Giratina, was still out there, waiting. The origin balls had bought time, but the final confrontation was yet to come. The banished dragon, Giratina, had not been captured. It was still free, still scheming, still hungry for revenge against the creator that had cast it out. The stage was set for a battle that would decide the fate of the entire region, and at the center of it all stood Ray, the stranger from the future, holding the key to a power that could either save or destroy everything. The next chapter would be the final stand of the banished, a confrontation that would test not just strength, but the very meaning of redemption and forgiveness. I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. The origin ball had done its work. The raging deities of time and space, Dialga and Palkia, were contained within that crimson sphere, their furious cries silenced. The sky above Mount Coronet began to still, the space-time rift flickering, as if uncertain whether to close or to tear open once more. For a brief, fragile moment there was peace. The leaders of the Diamond and Pearl clans stood in stunned reverence, their lifelong worship of these beings now transformed into something far more complex, a mixture of awe, fear, and the dawning realization that they had only ever understood fragments of a much larger truth. But peace, as it so often does in the presence of gods, proved to be an illusion. The ground beneath the summit did not simply shake, it the stillness. A sound emerged from the depths of Mount Coronet itself, a low, resonant groan that seemed to come from everywhere at once, as if the mountain were a living throat, preparing to speak. The air grew cold, then cold beyond cold, and the colours of the world began to drain away. The sky, which had just begun to heal, twisted into a sickly violet bruise. The space-time rift did not close. Instead, it not along its edges, but at its centre, as though something had reached through from the other side and pulled, and from that impossible wound, a shape began to emerge. It did not descend from the rift. It out of it like smoke given form, like a scream given substance. 6 serpentine limbs, each ending in a claw that seemed to bend light around it, unfolded from a central body that defied geometry. Its head was a mask of fury, with eyes that burned like dying stars, and a mouth that opened not to roar, but to. This was Giratina, the renegade Pokémon, the banished one, the master of the distortion world, and it was not alone. Behind it, walking calmly through the chaos, as though he had been expecting the moment all along, came Volo. His silver hair was wild, his eyes alight with a fervour that bordered on madness, and in his hand he held a Pokeball that seemed to pulse with a dark, rhythmic heartbeat. He did not look at the stunned leaders, nor at the trembling members of the Survey Corps, who had accompanied you to the summit. He looked only at you, and he smiled. You had known Volo as a merchant, a historian, a helpful guide through the ancient ruins of Hisui. You had traded with him, shared stories, and perhaps even considered him a friend. But the man standing before you now was a stranger wearing a familiar face. He spoke, and his voice carried a calm that was far more terrifying than any scream. He told you that he had always known the truth. He had studied the plates, deciphered the ancient texts of the Celestica civilization, and understood what even the clans had failed to grasp. Arceus was not a benevolent creator to be worshipped. Arceus was who had shaped the universe according to its own design, banishing any who dared to defy its will. And Giratina, the first to rebel, had been cast into a prison of non-existence for the crime of seeking freedom. Volo's pact with the banished dragon was not born of malice, he claimed. It was born of revelation. He intended to summon Arceus, to challenge it, to unmake the current world and recreate it in a form where he and Giratina would have the power to shape destiny itself. The space-time rift, the frenzy of the noble Pokémon, the chaos that had torn Hisui apart. All of it was a prelude to this single defining moment. And you, the stranger from the rift, the one chosen by Arceus, were the final piece of his plan. If he could defeat you, he could break Arceus's will. If he could break Arceus's will, he could remake existence. Giratina did not wait for the speech to end. It descended upon the summit with a fury that made the earlier battle with Dialga and Palkia seem like a skirmish. Its claws tore through the stone as though it were paper, and its body moved in ways that defied physics, flickering in and out of visibility, existing in multiple places at once. The air around it warped, and those who looked directly at it felt their minds against the impossibility of its form. This was not a Pokémon. This was a fundamental law of reality that had been broken and reshaped into a weapon. You had no choice but to fight. And so began the brutal combat between the player and the master of the distortion world. It was not a battle of strength alone. It was a battle of. Giratina did not attack in straight lines. It attacked from angles that should not exist, from directions that your eyes could not follow. Its claws struck from behind, even as its face stared at you from the front. Its shadow moved independently, reaching for your ankles, pulling at your soul. Every time you thought you had found a rhythm, the world around you shifted, and you were no longer standing on the summit of Mount Coronet, but floating in the void of the distortion world, where up and down had no meaning, and the stars were not stars but the eyes of forgotten things. Your Pokémon fought with a courage that bordered on desperation. They landed hits, but each strike seemed to do less damage than it should, as though Giratina was partially existing only halfway in this dimension. Volo, meanwhile, directed the battle with the cold precision of a scholar who had spent years calculating every possible outcome. He sent out his own Pokémon, not to defeat yours, but to drain your resources, to force you to make mistakes. He knew that you had used the Origin Ball to capture Dialga and Palkia. He knew that you were exhausted. He knew that you were afraid, but he did not know everything. Arceus had chosen you for a reason, and as the battle reached its peak, as Giratina prepared a final, world-ending attack that would have torn the summit apart and sent the fragments of Hisui spiraling into the void, something shifted. The arc phone in your pocket grew warm. A light, golden and pure, began to emanate from it, and that light cut through the violet haze of the distortion world like a blade through silk. Giratina hesitated. For the first time, its eyes showed something other than rage. They showed recognition and fear. The light did not attack, not in words, but in a presence that filled the space around you, a warmth that felt like the first sunrise of creation. And in that presence, Giratina remembered. It remembered what it had been before the banishment. It remembered the purpose Arceus had given it, the role it was meant to play in the balance of the universe. It had been created not as a prisoner, but as the guardian of the boundary between dimensions, the one who ensured that the chaos of antimatter did not consume the fragile order of time and space. Its rebellion had not been a quest for freedom. It had been a misunderstanding, a wound that had festered for millennia. Volo screamed. He demanded that Giratina attack, that it finish what they had started. But Giratina no longer listened. Its form began to shift, the jagged edges of its distortion world body smoothing into something more familiar, more. It turned to face Volo, and in that moment, the merchant saw the truth he had refused to accept. He had not made a pact with a liberator. He had made a pact with a broken thing, and now that thing was healing. Giratina did not destroy Volo. It simply him. It turned its gaze upward, toward the rift that still hung in the sky, and with a sound that was almost gentle, it began to pull the rift closed. The violet light faded, the colours of the world returned, the mountains stopped groaning, and Giratina, the banished one, the renegade Pokémon, ascended into the sky and vanished, returning to its role as the protector of the distortion world, Sinnoh, who watches over the boundary between what is and what could be. Volo fell to his knees. His plan was in ruins, his ally was gone, and the stranger from the rift, the one he had underestimated, stood before him, victorious. He did not speak. He simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the wilderness. His madness now a quiet, hollow thing. The summit was silent. The rift was sealed. The noble Pokémon were calm, and you stood alone, the Arcphone warm in your hand, a single message glowing on its screen. It was not a command, it was an invitation. Arceus was waiting, and in the next chapter, you would finally meet the Alpha. The battle with Giratina and Volo was over, but the sky above Mount Coronet remained torn, a wound in the fabric of reality that pulsed with a sickly golden light. You stood at the summit, the Origin Ball heavy in your hand, the echoes of the distortion world still ringing in your mind. And then the Arcphone vibrated, a new message, not in words but in a feeling, a pull, a command, a summons. It was time to ascend. The path to the Hall of Origin is not a physical one. It is a journey that begins at the highest peak of Mount Coronet, where the air thins and the boundary between the material world and the divine realm grows porous. You raised the azure flute, a relic you had carried without fully understanding its purpose, and played a note that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of the universe. The rift above you did not close. Instead, it opened wider, and a staircase of light spiraled upward, each step shimmering with the essence of creation itself. You climbed, not with your legs, but with your will. Each step felt like a lifetime, a compression of time and space, as you left behind the world of Hisui, of Sinnoh, of mortal concerns. The air grew thick with a presence that was not wind, not energy, but awareness. You were being watched. You were being measured. And then the staircase ended, and you stood in a place that had no name, a chamber of golden light, where the walls were not walls but the edges of existence. Before you, there was no throne, no pedestal. There was only a silhouette of light, a shape that shifted between a horse, a dragon, a being of pure geometry. It was Arceus, the original one, and it was not looking at you. It was looking through you, into the very soul of the universe you had just traversed. The voice that spoke was not sound. It was a vibration that bypassed your ears and resonated directly in your consciousness. It said, "You have proven yourself worthy of standing before me. You have quelled the chaos, subdued my children, and faced the darkness that sought to unmake my creation. But now you must face me." This was the trial of the Alpha Pokémon. Arceus did not attack with fury. It attacked with understanding. It shifted its form, and suddenly it was not one type but all types. The plates that adorned its body, the Draco plate, the fist plate, the splash plate, each glowed in succession, and with each glow, Arceus became something new. Fire, water, grass, electric, ice, fighting, poison, ground, flying, psychic, bug, rock, ghost, dragon, dark, steel, fairy. 18 types, 18 aspects of reality, each one a lesson in the nature of existence. You fought not with strength alone, but with knowledge. Every move you made was countered by a perfect defense, every strategy unraveled by a shift in elemental identity. Arceus was not trying to defeat you. It was teaching you that to capture the creator, you must first understand the creation. The battle was a dance, a conversation, a prayer, and when at last you threw the Origin Ball, it did not strike Arceus. It opened, and Arceus stepped inside willingly. The implications of that moment are staggering. A human, a mortal being, had captured the entity that existed before time, before space, before the concept of a universe. What does it mean to hold the creator in a ball? Is it a cage or a covenant? In the Pokémon world, capture is not domination, it is partnership. But with Arceus, the partnership is not between equals. It is between the finite and the infinite, the temporal and the eternal. You did not tame a god, you were entrusted with one. As the Hall of Origin faded, and you returned to the summit of Mount Coronet, the rift in the sky sealed itself, and the world of Hisui breathed again. But you carried with you a weight that no Pokeball could contain. You had seen the face of the Alpha, and you had been changed. The question that lingers, the question that will echo through the next chapter of this story, is not whether you can capture a god, but what it means for a god to give itself to a mortal. That is the mystery of the panentheistic soul. The golden light that stood before you at the summit of Mount Coronet was not merely a Pokémon. It was not simply a creator god who had shaped the universe and then stepped back to watch. In that moment, when you faced Arceus in the Hall of Origin, you were standing in the presence of something far more profound, an entity that does not exist within reality, but rather contains all of reality within itself. This is the concept that theologians and philosophers call panentheism. Unlike pantheism, which says that God is identical to the universe, panentheism holds that the divine is both immanent within creation and transcendent beyond it. Arceus is not the universe is inside Arceus. Every star, every dimension, every moment of time, every thought that has ever been or will ever be, all of it resides within the soul of the Alpha Pokémon. And when you stood before that being, you were standing at the center of all existence, looking outward from the inside of its consciousness. To understand how this is possible, we have to look at the plates. Those mysterious artifacts that Arceus can hold to change its type are not merely items of power. They are the fundamental building blocks of reality itself. Each plate represents a core aspect of existence. The flame plate holds the essence of fire, the splash plate the essence of water, the meadow plate the essence of grass, and so on through all 18 types. But these are not just elemental forces. They are the raw, undiluted principles that govern how the universe operates. The dread plate, for example, is not simply about dark type moves. It embodies the concept of fear, of shadow, of the unknown. The mind plate holds the essence of psychic energy, of thought, of consciousness itself. When Arceus changes its type by holding a different plate, it is not merely swapping a move type, it is reorienting its entire being to align with a specific fundamental law of creation. It becomes, for that moment, the living embodiment of that principle. And because Arceus contains all of these principles within itself, simultaneously, it can shift between them at will. The plates are not external sources of power. They are keys that unlock different aspects of its own infinite nature. They are the alphabet of reality. And Arceus is the language that speaks the cosmos into being. This is why Arceus can exist in all times and places at once. If you contain all of space within your soul, then there is no location that is outside of you. If you contain all of time within your consciousness, then there is no moment that is not present to you. The Arceus you met at the Hall of Origin was not a separate being that travelled to that place. It was a localized manifestation of the infinite whole. The true Arceus is not bound by the linear flow of past, present and future. It experiences all of them simultaneously. When you caught that Arceus in the Origin Ball, you did not capture the totality of the Alpha Pokémon. You captured a fragment, a projection, a sliver of its attention that chose to interact with you in a way you could comprehend. Think about what this means for the events of Pokémon Legends. Arceus, the space-time rift that tore open above Mount Coronet, was not an accident. It was a symptom of a deeper disturbance. When Giratina and Volo attacked, they were not assaulting a distant god. They were tearing at the fabric of the very soul that holds all things together. The rift was a wound in the panentheistic body of Arceus, and when you sealed that rift, when you quelled the frenzied nobles, when you captured Dialga and Palkia, and defeated Giratina, you were not just saving the Hisui region, you were healing a fracture in the divine essence itself. The ancient Celestica civilization understood this. They knew that Arceus was not a king on a throne, but the ground beneath all thrones, the air that fills all lungs, the silence between all thoughts. They built the temple of Sinnoh not as a house for a god, but as a point of connection, a place where the infinite could touch the finite. The temple's architecture, aligned with the stars and the ley lines of the land, was designed to resonate with the fundamental frequencies of the plates. It was a tuning fork for the soul of the world. But that knowledge faded. The Diamond and Pearl clans worshipped Dialga and Palkia, mistaking the servants for the master. They saw time and space as the ultimate realities, not realizing that both are contained within a greater whole. Even the creation trio themselves, Dialga, Palkia and Giratina, are not independent gods. They are emanations, aspects of Arceus' own nature given form and purpose. When Arceus created them, it did not fashion them from external materials. It extruded parts of its own being, like a star casting off light. They are Arceus, yet they are not the whole of Arceus. This is why the Origin Ball was able to capture the manifestation of Arceus. That ball was forged from the essence of the plates themselves, from the building blocks of reality. It was a container made of the same substance as the infinite, and when you threw it, you were not trapping a god. You were inviting a fragment of the divine to accompany you. The Arceus that now resides in your possession is a piece of the whole, a living shard of the panentheistic soul. It can still change types with the plates. It can still command the forces of creation, but it is now bound to your timeline, your space, your reality. The rest of Arceus remains beyond, watching all moments at once, holding the universe in its embrace. And that raises a question that will echo through the next chapter. If Arceus can recreate the eggs of Dialga, Palkia, and the late Guardians at will, if it can restore what was lost, then what else is it capable of rebuilding? What power lies dormant in the ability to remake not just a Pokémon, but an entire world? The answer to that question is the key to understanding the final mystery of the Alpha Pokémon, and it will lead us directly into the next chapter, the power to recreate. We ended the last chapter standing in the Hall of Origin, contemplating the nature of Arceus as a panentheistic soul, a being that does not simply rule over time and space, but contains them within its own essence. The plates, those fragments of crystallized reality, are not tools Arceus wields from the outside. They are pieces of its own being, the fundamental building blocks of existence made manifest. And yet, for all that cosmic weight, is a question that lingers in the silence of that golden hall. If Arceus contains all of reality within itself, what happens when that reality must be remade? This is where we must turn to a concept that is deeply rooted in the spiritual traditions of our own world, specifically Shinto, the indigenous faith of Japan. In Shinto, there is a profound understanding of creation and destruction as two sides of the same divine coin. The kami, the spirits that inhabit all things, are not static. They are born, they flourish, they decay, and they are reborn. This cycle is not a flaw in the cosmic order. It is the very engine that drives it. And it is this same principle that underlies the power of Arceus, the original one, to recreate. The original spirit is not a finite resource. It is not a battery that drains with use. It is the very substance of Arceus's consciousness, the unified awareness that predated the universe itself. And from this spirit, new life can be manifested at will. This is not creation in the sense of a craftsman, building a machine from separate parts. It is a birthing, a flowing forth of living essence from a source that is inexhaustible. The Shinto concept of musubi, the creative and unifying power of the kami, finds its ultimate expression here. Arceus does not just create, it recreates, renews, and regenerates. Perhaps the most direct demonstration of this power is found in the Sinnoh ruins, a location that exists in a liminal space between the regions of Yoto and Sinnoh. These ruins are ancient, older than the civilizations that would later build the temples of Ekritique City or the Spear Pillar. They are a place where the veil between dimensions is thin, where the presence of the original one can be felt more keenly than anywhere else. And it is here that Arceus performed a miracle that defies our conventional understanding of time and existence. In the Sinnoh ruins, Arceus demonstrated its ability to birth an entirely new creation trio. Think about the weight of that statement for a moment. Dialga, Palkia and Giratina are not mere Pokémon. They are the fundamental pillars of reality itself. Time, space and antimatter are not concepts that can be duplicated or copied like a photograph. They are the very fabric of existence, and yet Arceus can create them anew. In the ruins, a single Arceus, standing at the centre of a sacred circle, can call forth a new Dialga, a new Palkia, a new Giratina from the original spirit. These are not shadows or echoes of the originals. They are fully realised deities, complete with their own dominion over the cosmos. This event tells us something crucial about the nature of the Pokémon universe. It is not a single fixed timeline. It is a multiverse, a tapestry of infinite threads, and Arceus is the weaver. When a new creation trio is born, a new universe is born with them. The Sinnoh ruins are not just a place of worship. They are a cosmic birthing chamber, and the fact that this can happen at all suggests that the cycle of destruction and rebirth is not a one-time event. It is ongoing. It is eternal. The Alpha Pokémon governs an infinite cycle. Destruction is not an end. It is a prelude. Rebirth is not a beginning. It is a continuation. When Giratina was banished to the Distortion world, that was not a final judgment. It was a rebalancing. When Dialga and Palkia were enraged and had to be calmed by the late Guardians, that was not a failure of the system. It was a necessary correction. And when the space-time rift tore open above Mount Coronet, that was not a catastrophe without purpose. It was a signal that the cycle was turning once more. Arceus does not intervene in the affairs of mortals out of caprice or sentiment. It intervenes because the cycle demands it. The Volo incident, the battle with the legendary hero, the summoning of the player from the future, all of these are ripples in the great river of cosmic time, and Arceus is the river itself, flowing endlessly from the original spirit, through the Hall of Origin, and back into the void from which it first emerged. But what does this mean for those who study these events? What does it mean for the scholars who have dedicated their lives to understanding the divine architecture of the Pokémon world? One such figure is Professor Laventon, a man who documented the Hisui region and its legends. He was not a warrior or a prophet. He was a scientist, a man of observation and reason, and yet he was present at the most miraculous events in recorded history. He saw the space-time rift. He witnessed the rampage of the creation trio. He stood in the presence of Arceus itself. His perspective is unique, and it is one we have not yet fully explored. How did a man of science reconcile what he saw with what he believed? How did he process the reality of a being that exists beyond all known laws of physics? These questions will lead us into our next chapter, where we will examine the world through the eyes of the professor who chronicled the impossible. For now, rest in the knowledge that the cycle continues and the Alpha watches over all. We have seen Arceus birth a new creation trio from the very essence of its being, a cycle of renewal that echoes the Shinto rituals of the Sinnoh ruins. But that event, as cosmic as it was, happened in a time long before any human chronicler could witness it. The true challenge of understanding Arceus did not begin in the ancient past, but in the relatively recent history of Hisui, when a man named Professor Laventon picked up his quill and tried to do the impossible, to write down what could not be written, to classify what defied all classification. Laventon was a scholar of the natural world, a man who believed that every creature, no matter how strange, could be observed, measured, and recorded. He had spent years compiling the first Pokédex of the Hisui region, a monumental effort to catalogue every Pokémon that walked, swam, or flew across that untamed land. But when he first heard the legends of the being the ancient Celestica called Almighty Sinnoh, he faced a crisis of methodology. How do you document a god? How do you assign a number, a type, a height, a weight, to something that is said to exist beyond time and space itself? Laventon's struggle to document a being that defies scientific classification is not just a footnote in history. It is the very reason we have any record of Arceus at all. He was a man of the Enlightenment, steeped in the belief that reason could illuminate all mysteries. Yet here was a mystery that seemed to swallow reason whole. The Diamond Clan spoke of a Lord Sinnoh that controlled time. The Pearl Clan spoke of a different Lord Sinnoh that controlled space. Both were wrong, and yet both were, in a sense, pointing at the same truth from different angles. Laventon had to navigate these conflicting oral traditions, these fragmentary carvings on ancient ruins, and the terrifying first-hand accounts of those who had witnessed the space-time rift above Mount Coronet. He began to piece together that the name Sinnoh was a human label, a crude approximation of a power so vast that the human mind could only grasp it through metaphor. The transition from Lord Sinnoh mythology to the modern Arceus taxonomy was not a simple renaming. It was a paradigm shift, a move from worship to observation. Laventon, perhaps unknowingly, became the bridge between the age of faith and the age of science. He stopped calling the being Almighty Sinnoh in his notes and started using the name the Celestica had whispered in their most secret rites, Arceus. He understood that to truly study this entity, he had to strip away the layers of human projection, the titles of Lord and Almighty, and see it as a Pokémon. The Alpha Pokémon, yes, but still a creature that could, in theory, be encountered. But how could a Pokédex entry capture the essence of a being that contains all of existence within its soul? Laventon wrote and rewrote the entry countless times. He described Arceus as the heavenly fount from which pours the light that shines across Hisui, a phrase that is more poetry than taxonomy. He noted its ability to change type by holding different plates, a mechanic he could observe only indirectly through the behavior of the plates themselves. He recorded its telepathic speech, its shimmering golden form, its residence in a dimension beyond the reach of any human, and yet he knew his entry was incomplete. He could measure its height, its weight, its base stats, but those numbers felt like measuring the ocean with a teaspoon. It was this very humility, this acceptance of the limits of science, that made the Hisuian Pokédex the foundation for all future understanding. Laventon did not claim to have captured Arceus in a cage of facts. Instead, he left his entry open, a living document that invited future generations to add their own observations. He preserved the ancient myths alongside his own measurements, creating a hybrid record that respected both the divine and the empirical. When later scholars in Sinnoh and beyond compiled the modern Pokédex, they built directly on Laventon's work. The entry for Arceus in every subsequent generation, from the Yoto region to the far-off Paldea, owes its structure to that first, trembling attempt by a man who dared to write down the unwritable. And so, the professor's perspective gives us a unique lens. Not the view from the Hall of Origin, but the view from the study, the campfire, the field notebook. It is the perspective of a human trying to understand the infinite with finite tools. And it is precisely because of that struggle that we now have a name for the original one, a taxonomy that, however imperfect, allows us to speak of Arceus at all. But Laventon's work was only the beginning. The modern era would bring new encounters, new technologies, and new questions about what it means to capture a god. That story, the story of how the legend of Arceus was finally integrated into the global consciousness of the Pokémon world, is one we will explore in the next chapter. The Modern Era Legacy. Professor Laventon, in his attempt to classify the being he called Arceus, inadvertently set in motion the very process that would bury the truth deeper. He gave it a name, a taxonomy, a place in the scientific order, but in doing so he also gave it a cage. The ancient Celestica civilization, the ones who once walked the slopes of Mount Coronet and whispered prayers to the original one, did not think of Arceus as a species to be catalogued. They knew it as the living breath of the universe, the source of all that is, was, and ever will be. And they built a monument to that knowledge. That monument still stands today, though its meaning has been hollowed out by time. The spear pillar, in the modern era of Sinnoh, is often described by tourists and trainers as a sacred ruin, a place of legend, a backdrop for the rare encounter with Dialga or Palkia. But that description misses the point entirely. The Spear Pillar is not a temple to the creation trio. It is a tomb for the ancient knowledge of Arceus. The Celestica people did not build it as a place of worship for the gods of time and space. They built it as a vault, a sealed chamber where the most profound truths about the alpha Pokémon were inscribed into the very stone, hidden away from the unworthy. When their civilization crumbled, the knowledge did not vanish. It was entombed. The pillars, the carvings, the geometry of the site itself, all of it was a language, a memory, a final testament to a reality that the modern world has forgotten. Why did that knowledge fade? Why did Arceus, the architect of existence, become reduced to a mythical Pokémon in the eyes of the present day? The answer lies in the nature of time itself and in the quiet erosion of belief. The Celestica people did not just die out. They were absorbed, their stories diluted, their sacred sites repurposed. The Diamond and Pearl clans that followed inherited fragments, but they misinterpreted them. They saw the power of Dialga and Palkia and assumed those were the ultimate deities. They built their own faiths around the wrong gods, and as generations passed, the original truth became a ghost story, a footnote in the history of a region that had moved on. The modern Pokémon League, the scientific community, the gym challenges, they all operate in a world where Arceus is a rumor, a rare event, a prize for the most dedicated trainer. The awe that once shook the heavens has been domesticated into a Pokédex entry, but there is a thread, a thin silver cord that still connects the modern trainer to that lost era. It is the Azure Flute. This artifact, spoken of in whispers among collectors and lore enthusiasts, is not merely a key to a hidden room. It is a relic of the Celestica tradition, a musical instrument that was once used in rituals to commune with the divine. The flute's song is not a code or a password, it is a resonance. When a trainer blows the Azure Flute at the Spear Pillar, they are not opening a door, they are aligning their own spirit with the frequency of the ancient knowledge that sleeps beneath the stone. The Hall of Origin does not exist in the same dimension as the Spear Pillar. It exists in the space between belief and memory. The flute calls Arceus, not because it is a magical key, but because it reminds the original one of the pact it made with humanity long ago. A pact that said, "If you remember me, I will still be here." The modern trainer, standing on the summit of Mount Coronet, holding that flute, is the last echo of the Celestica people. They carry the same breath, the same hope, the same fragile connection to the source of all things. And when they play the melody, the tomb opens, not to release a monster, but to reveal a truth that has been waiting, patient and silent, for centuries. The knowledge of Arceus did not fade because it was lost. It faded because it was hidden, protected, kept safe from a world that was not ready to understand it. But the flute still works. The Hall of Origin still exists. And somewhere in the quiet of a starless sky, the alpha Pokémon still listens. This is the legacy of the modern era, a world that has forgotten, but a world that can still remember. And that memory, fragile as it is, holds a power that no Pokédex can quantify. It is the power of a trainer who dares to believe that the gods are not just stories, and that belief in turn shapes the very fabric of reality. But what happens when that belief is tested not by faith, but by combat? When the trainer, who has proven worthy of the flute, must prove themselves worthy of the alpha's strength? That is a question that leads us to the next chapter, where we explore the true measure of divine power in battle. The Hall of Origin is not a place of rest. It is a proving ground, and Arceus does not grant audiences to the timid. The Spear Pillar stands as a monument to what was forgotten. In modern Sinnoh, its stone arches and weathered pillars no longer echo with the hymns of ancient worshippers. Instead, they serve as a silent tomb for knowledge that once defined the very fabric of reality. The Celestica civilization crumbled, and with it, the true understanding of Arceus faded into the realm of myth. But while human memory may falter, numbers do not. And when we strip away the reverence, the legends and the sacred titles, What remains is a cold, hard statistic that places Arceus at the pinnacle of combat supremacy. Let us evaluate Arceus' stats against other legendary entities like Mewtwo. Mewtwo, the genetically engineered psychic terror, has long been considered one of the most powerful Pokémon ever created. Its base stat total of 680 is formidable, and its mega evolutions push that even higher. But Arceus sits at a base stat total of 720. That is the highest of any Pokémon that does not undergo a temporary transformation. Every single one of Arceus' stats is a flat 120. No weaknesses, no glaring holes. It is perfectly balanced, like a divine architect who designed a being with no cracks in its armor. Mewtwo may excel in special attack and speed, but Arceus has no such specialization. It is simply excellent at everything, and that is a terrifying kind of perfection. But raw numbers only tell part of the story. The versatility of the multi-type ability and its dominance in battle is what truly elevates Arceus from a powerful creature to an undisputed god of the competitive hierarchy. Multi-type allows Arceus to change its type by holding different plates. In the games, this means Arceus can adapt to any situation, counter any opponent, and exploit any weakness. It can become a water type to douse a fire, a ghost type to evade a fighting move, or a steel type to shrug off poison. There is no type chart that can trap Arceus, and because it can learn nearly every move in existence, its move pool is as vast as its adaptability. It can run a defensive set, an offensive sweeper, a support tank, whatever the battle demands. This is not just power, this is omnipotence in a competitive format. Why Arceus remains the undisputed god of the Pokémon competitive hierarchy is not merely about its stats or its ability. It is about the sheer presence it commands. In any tier where Arceus is allowed, it warps the entire meta around itself. Opponents must prepare specifically for it, and even then, they can never be sure which type they will face. It is a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. The creation trio, Dialga, Palkia and Giratina, each have their own strengths, but they are bound by their types and their roles. Arceus is bound by nothing. It is the original, the alpha, the one from which all others derive their power, and in battle, that translates into a level of control that no other Pokémon can match. Yet for all its combat supremacy, Arceus is not merely a warrior. Its role as a protector is woven into the very fabric of its existence. The plates it uses to change its type are not just tools for battle, they are fragments of the original spirit, pieces of the universe itself. And when Arceus fights, it does so not for glory, but to maintain the balance it created. This brings us to a deeper understanding of its nature, one that goes beyond stats and abilities. In the next chapter, we will explore what it truly means for Arceus to be the protector of all. How does a god defend its creation? And what happens when that protection is tested? We've spent the last chapter measuring Arceus's raw power, its unmatched stats, its ability to shift type on a whim, its capacity to stand alone against the very forces it created. But raw power, even divine power, is not the same as purpose. And if there is one thing that defines Arceus more than its strength, it is the quiet, almost invisible way it chooses to use that strength. The original one does not wage war. It does not conquer. It does not parade through the mortal realm, demanding worship. Instead, it watches. It waits. And when the balance of all existence tips toward total collapse, it speaks. Arceus' voice is not a sound that travels through air. It is telepathic, a direct imprint of thought into the mind of the recipient. Across countless eras, scattered throughout human history, there are records, fragmentary, often dismissed as myth or madness, of individuals who heard a voice that was not their own, a voice that carried no anger, no pleading, only a calm crystalline clarity. The Celestica civilization, the ancient people of Hisui, left behind carvings and songs that describe a light that whispered during times of great upheaval. The message was always the same: restore the balance, or everything will be unmade. But here is the mystery that has puzzled scholars and trainers alike. Why does Arceus only intervene when the situation is already catastrophic? Why not prevent the collapse before it begins? The answer lies in the very nature of creation. Arceus did not build a universe of puppets. It built a universe of free will, of cause and effect, of time and space that flow according to their own laws. To step in too early would be to deny that freedom, to erase the choices of every living being. Arceus respects the autonomy of its creation more than any other deity in any mythology. It is the protector of all, not the ruler of all. It protects by ensuring that the framework of reality remains intact, not by micromanaging every conflict. That is why its interventions are so rare. They are reserved for moments when the framework itself is cracking. When Dialga and Palkia rage against each other, threatening to tear apart the fabric of time and space, Arceus does not descend to scold them. It created the Lake Guardians, Uxie, Mesprit, Azelf, to serve as calming agents, to whisper reason into the hearts of the creation trio. And when even that fails, when a human like Volo makes a pact with Giratina and rips open a space-time rift above Mount Coronet, Arceus does not smite the offender. Instead, it reaches across dimensions and chooses a single mortal, a boy from another time, to set things right. It empowers, but it does not dominate. This relationship between the creator and the lesser, mythical Pokémon is one of profound distance and yet intimate connection. Arceus is not a parent hovering over its children. It is more like the foundation of a house, unseen, unthanked, but absolutely essential. Dialga, Palkia, Giratina, the Lake Guardians. They are not servants, they are extensions of Arceus' will, each given a fragment of its own nature to govern independently. The creation trio holds the reins of reality, but they are not the source. They can be corrupted, enraged, or misled. And when they are, Arceus does not punish them. It simply reasserts the original pattern, often through the hands of mortals who have proven themselves worthy. There is a quiet tragedy in this. Arceus is the most powerful being in existence, yet it is also the most alone. It dwells in the Hall of Origin, a dimension beyond time and space, where no other creature can truly reach it. Its communications are rare, its appearances rarer still, and when it does manifest, it does so as a silhouette of golden light, a form that is more symbol than substance. It is as if Arceus knows that to be fully present in the mortal world would overwhelm it, would shatter the very balance it seeks to preserve. So it speaks in whispers. It sends visions to ancient heroes. It guides lost travelers through dreams. It leaves behind artifacts like the Azure Flute and the Origin Ore as faint echoes of its presence. And every time, the message is the same. You are part of a whole. The whole must remain intact. Do not let it break. This is the protector that humanity has misunderstood for millennia. The Diamond Clan worshipped Dialga. The Pearl Clan worshipped Palkia, both mistaking the servants for the master. Even the name Arceus is a human invention, a label we attach to something we could never fully comprehend. But perhaps the most telling detail is that Arceus never corrects us. It does not demand that we call it by its true name. It does not punish our ignorance. It simply waits, patient as the void from which it was born, for the moment when its voice is truly needed. And that moment is always the same. When the cycle of creation and destruction threatens to become a permanent end. When the balance has tipped so far that only the original one can set it right. Then and only then does the golden light appear. Then and only then does the telepathic whisper cut through the noise of mortal chaos. We have seen that pattern repeat across the ages. From the legendary hero of ancient Sinnoh, who battled Arceus directly, to the Volo incident where a boy from the future captured the creator itself in an origin ball. Each time, Arceus allowed itself to be challenged, to be caught, to be understood on human terms. Not because it was weak, but because it understood that true protection requires trust. It trusted that the hero, the boy, the trainer would make the right choice, and they did. But what happens when the cycle itself begins to loop? When the same patterns of collapse and restoration repeat endlessly, and Arceus must decide whether to break the cycle or let it continue. That question leads us directly into the next chapter of this story. a chapter that explores the eternal rhythm of creation, destruction, and rebirth, a chapter that asks whether even a god can escape the pull of its own design. That is chapter 28, the eternal cycle, and it may change everything you thought you knew about the alpha Pokémon. And so we arrive at the final chapter of this story, a story that began not with a bang, but with a whisper from a void of absolute nothingness. We have traced the path of the original one, from that singular egg, through the forging of time and space, the banishment of antimatter, and the delicate balancing act of the late Guardians. We have seen how civilizations worshipped, misunderstood, and ultimately forgot the true nature of the being they called Lord Sinnoh. We have watched as a boy from the future, guided by a golden light, quelled the chaos of a fractured world. But now, we must ask the question that lingers after every origin story, after every epic tale of creation and conflict. What happens next? What is the ultimate fate of the original spirit? And what does that mean for the universe it shaped? To understand the future, we must first return to the very beginning, to the concept of the original spirit itself. This was not merely a soul or a consciousness, but a unified field of potential. It was the thought that preceded the thought, the silence that contained all possible sounds. In that state, before the egg, before the thousand arms stretched out, there was no distinction between Arceus and the universe it would create. The original spirit was the universe, compressed into a single point of infinite possibility. When Arceus emerged, it did not create the universe from the outside, like a potter shaping clay. It unfolded the universe from within itself, like a dreamer waking into their own dream. Every atom, every star, every pocket of space, and every tick of time was a piece of that original consciousness, given form and separation. This is the panentheistic truth at the heart of the myth. The universe is not Arceus' creation. It is Arceus' body stretched thin across dimensions. This understanding reframes everything we have discussed. The thousand arms, for instance, were never literal limbs. They were the conduits of this unfolding, the metaphorical tendrils of will that reached into the void and wove the fabric of reality. But here lies the enduring mystery that no scholar, no researcher, and no player character has ever fully solved. Why 1,000? Why that specific number? It is a number that appears in ancient texts from the Celestica civilization, etched into the walls of the Temple of Sinnoh, and whispered in the chants of the Diamond and Pearl clans. 1,000 arms to shape a universe, but 1,000 is not infinite. It is a finite, deliberate number. This suggests that the act of creation, as grand as it was a specific, bounded event. It was not an eternal, ongoing process. Arceus used those 1,000 arms to set the cosmic clockwork in motion, and then it withdrew. It stepped back into its dimension, beyond time and space, leaving the universe to run its course. The mystery of the 1,000 arms is a reminder that we have only seen the blueprint, not the full architecture. There are layers to this creation, purposes and patterns that remain hidden from mortal perception, and this brings us to the most profound reflection on the future of the Pokémon world. If the universe is Arceus' body, then the universe is not permanent. Just as a body ages, grows tired, and eventually ceases to function, so too does the cosmos. The laws of thermodynamics, the slow decay of all energy into entropy. These are not flaws in the design, they are features. They are the built-in expiration date of the dream. The original spirit, in its infinite wisdom, did not create a static paradise. It created a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. The very existence of time, governed by Dialga, implies a linear progression toward a final moment. The existence of space, governed by Palkia, implies a finite boundary. And the existence of antimatter, governed by Giratina, implies the potential for unmaking. The universe is a grand narrative, and every narrative must have a conclusion. So what happens when the final star burns out? What happens when the last Pokémon fades, and the last human thought dissolves into the void? What happens when Dialga's clock stops, and Palkia's fabric tears beyond repair? This is where the possibility of Arceus' return becomes not just a myth, but a cosmic necessity. The cycle must close. When the universe ends, it will not simply vanish into nothingness. It will collapse back into the singularity from which it came. The thousand arms will retract. The creation trio will return to the original spirit, their duties fulfilled. The lake guardians will cease their vigil, their knowledge reabsorbed into the whole, and Arceus, the alpha Pokémon, will once again be alone in the void. But this time, it will not be a void of chaos and nothingness. It will be a void filled with the memory of everything that ever was. Every life, every joy, every sorrow, every battle, every quiet moment of peace will be preserved within the original spirit. It will be the final archive, the ultimate library of existence. And then the cycle begins anew. From that silent, memory-laden void, a new egg will form, a new original spirit will stir, and a new universe, perhaps different from the last, perhaps identical, will be born from the thousand arms. This is the eternal cycle, the heartbeat of the cosmos. Arceus is not a god who sits on a throne, judging the living. Arceus is the breath that fills the lungs of reality, the pause between the out-breath and the in-breath. The end of the universe is not a tragedy, it is a reset. It is the necessary silence before the next song. This is the final revelation that the Celestica civilization understood, the truth that was too vast for the Diamond and Pearl clans to grasp. They saw the gods of time and space and mistook them for the Creator. But the Creator is not a ruler. The Creator is the cycle itself. And the next stage of cosmic evolution is not something we can predict. It is not a new Pokémon or a new region. It is a fundamental shift in the nature of reality. Perhaps the next universe will be one without conflict. Perhaps it will be one without physical form, a universe of pure thought. Or perhaps it will be exactly the same, a perfect loop so that every life can be lived again, every moment experienced anew. We cannot know. The mystery of the thousand arms is a door that remains closed to us. And so, we reach the end of this history, but not the end of the story. The story continues in the silence between your heartbeats. It continues in the quiet moments when you look up at the stars and feel a sense of wonder. It continues in every new game, every new generation of Pokémon, every child who picks up a Pokéball for the first time. The original spirit is not gone. It is here in the world it created, waiting. It waits for the moment when the cycle turns, when the universe grows tired, and when the golden light returns to the void. Until that day, the mystery remains. And perhaps that is the greatest gift of all. A complete answer would be the end of wonder. But an eternal question, whispered from the heart of creation, is a story that never truly ends. Thank you for walking this path with me, from the void to the summit of Mount Coronet and beyond. Sleep well, knowing that you are a part of something far older and far more vast than any legend can contain. What did you think of this journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this changed your perspective or taught you something new, consider subscribing for more mind-expanding content. And if you know someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, share it with them. These are the kind of conversations that matter.